161. The Pioneers' Expedition, Arcanists' Plane Clearance, Floating City, Central Control Room. On the enormous light screen, the previous city plan had vanished, replaced by a dim, oppressive alien landscape, the Earth Elemental Plane. Countless creatures made of rock, soil, and crystal wandered across the barren ground. The framework is there, but the flesh and blood to fill it cannot rely solely on the magical world's meager mineral resources. Jason pointed to the elemental creatures on the screen. They, and the land beneath their feet, are our best building materials right now. Dumbledore and Snape, still adjusting to the changes in themselves after their promotions, turned toward him. "You mean," Dumbledore began, and then understood. "You want us to plunder?" "No, Principal," Jason corrected with a smile. "This isn't plundering. It's raw material collection. Consider this a field test of your new powers and a necessary cleanup." He gave them no time to argue. With a casual swipe across the control panel, a stable spatial gate appeared in the center of the room. From beyond it came the thick, oppressive aura of Earth Element and the distant rumble of roars. "Go," Jason gestured. "Let me see how efficient two newly promoted Arcanists are. I've only scanned this area. The highest level creature is a Tier 1 Elemental Lord. You can be assured of safety. If anything unexpected happens, I'll teleport you back immediately." Proxy service online. The lie-flat plan could now begin. Earth Elemental Plane. Gravity here was almost 3 times that of Hogwarts. Rock dust hung in the air, scraping at the throat with every breath. Dumbledore and Snape materialized on a gray, desolate plain. Almost immediately, the ground trembled. From the horizon, hundreds of low-level Earth Elementals surged in a unified charge. Some were rolling boulders, others were hulking, humanoid mounds of soil and stone, but all headed straight for the two outsiders. In the past, even Dumbledore would have treated such numbers with caution, but now he simply stood still, wand holstered. He lifted his eyes, and an invisible force field centered on him expanded outward. Group Deflection Field. It was a simple Tier 1 spell from the Arcane database. The first line of rolling rock elementals slammed into the field and immediately had their momentum redirected. Boulders that could have smashed city walls were guided along the field's edge, colliding with their own ranks and throwing the assault into disarray. Physical attacks became useless against the shimmering barrier. Dumbledore watched with a faint, approving smile. Efficient, energy-saving, and elegant. Time to clean up. He raised a finger, and pure white arrows of holy flame formed above his fingertip, trailing faint streaks of light, arcane missiles, modified by his phoenix magic. Dozens of them shot off at near teleport speed, each finding a different elemental. Explosions followed. The holy flame pierced the creature's cores, detonating them from within. Earth and stone shattered into clouds of debris and countless fragments. In under 10 seconds, hundreds of enemies were reduced to piles of elemental-infused low-level building material. Dumbledore lowered his hand. His internal reserves were barely touched. "It seems cleaning up minions suits you well." A cold voice answered. Snape had moved forward, eyes fixed on a distant, towering figure rising from the ground. A Tier 1 Elemental Lord stood 10 meters tall, its body of obsidian and crystal radiating a fierce energy. It roared at the demise of its kin and began gathering Earth Element power, preparing a massive spell. Dumbledore started forward, but Snape raised a hand to halt him. "This doesn't require all your effort," he said. Snape's outline blurred as he extended his hand. A faint green wisp shot from his fingertip and slipped into the Elemental Lord's form. Ray of Enfeeblement. The obsidian giant's dangerous shimmer dulled, its magic gathering slowed. As it struggled to force through the weakness, another slender surge of energy from Snape struck the forming spell matrix. Spell counter. The incipient casting disintegrated, the energy collapsing inward and causing the Elemental Lord a painful grunt. Perfect timing. "Now," Snape said. No further cue was needed. At the instant spell counter disrupted the enemy's spell, a condensed thunder spear streaked across the sky from Dumbledore. Though it arrived after the interruption, it struck first, piercing the Elemental Lord's now weakened chest. Lightning ravaged the obsidian form. The giant crumpled, shattering into glittering fragments. The coordination was seamless. One suppressed and controlled, the other delivered the efficient kill. The two former rivals, now Arcanists, demonstrated a synergy that left any opponent at a severe disadvantage. What followed was less an exploration than a harvest. Dumbledore's group deflection field kept low-level elementals at bay, while Snape's magic detection ignored worthless targets and homed in on leyline veins and crystal cores. When a powerful elemental lord appeared, Snape first weakened and interrupted. Dumbledore then finished it with the most efficient arcane strike. Their combined speed and precision were astonishing. Before long, a detailed map of leyline and crystal core distribution was imprinted in their minds. When the mission ended and they prepared to return, a few scattered, frightened low-level elementals still prowled the plane, moving hesitantly. "Severus," Dumbledore said suddenly, curiosity flickering in his eyes, "what if we try our old tools?" Snape said nothing, but did not object. Dumbledore drew the Elder Wand and flicked it at a lumbering elemental. Stupefy! A red bolt struck the creature. It merely swayed, dropped a few pebbles, and continued lumbering onward. Dumbledore blinked, surprised. Snape allowed a cold, expected sneer to curl his mouth. He leveled his own wand at another elemental, voice low and deadly. Avada Kedavra. The green light pierced the elemental's body and vanished without a trace. The creature did not flinch. The air seemed to freeze. Snape's sneer vanished. He stared at his wand, then at the unscathed creature, eyes wide with a shock that went beyond anger. The unfailingly lethal killing curse had failed. "It has no life, Severus," Dumbledore said dryly, understanding dawning. "At least not life as defined in our world. The killing curse cannot take away something that fundamentally does not possess life in the way it expects." They tried other spells. Sectum Sempra only left shallow marks on the rock. Crucio drew no reaction. Only basic, direct physical effects, Incendio, for instance, caused negligible damage. 90% of wizarding magic was useless on this plane. In that moment, they finally grasped Jason's intention. He had given them more than greater power. He had given them a universal system that could operate across different worlds' rules. All the wizarding magic they had once prided themselves on was merely knowledge tailored to a single world's laws. "It seems," Dumbledore said, putting away his wand and exhaling slowly, "our old era is truly over." Snape said nothing, but his clenched fist and sharp gaze spoke volumes. The pioneer's journey had only just begun. 162, a pet from another world. A lost rock spirit, floating city, central control room. The last spatial fluctuations died away, and the shimmering temporary teleportation gate blinked out. Dumbledore and Snape stepped back onto solid metal, returning from the Earth elemental plane, a place of warped gravity and endless dust. Breathing the clean air of the floating city, they both felt a weight lift from their chests. The mission is complete. Dumbledore brushed the dust from his robes, which somehow remained unsoiled after the fight. A small smile of satisfaction crossed his face. Arcane's practical application is even more convenient than we imagined. It was an understatement. The recent operation had amounted to a near plane-wide purge and had shown them just how powerful their new tool was. Elemental lords that once required careful strategy and cost to defeat had been overwhelmed by coordinated arcane strikes. Snape's expression was hard. He could still feel the flow of the breath of spiritual poison's elemental pool within him. For him, the battle had been a real-world test, proving the effectiveness of Weakening Ray and Spell Counter under pressure. An old era had clearly ended. "Well done, both of you." Jason's voice came from behind the control console. He stayed seated, eyes on the light screen where a torrent of data scrolled past. "Zero is analyzing the samples you brought back and the map you drew. Initial results are promising. Those high-purity geocrystalline cores will be enough for the energy hub to finish the first phase of its upgrade." He swiped the screen, bringing up the city's energy monitors. With this replenishment, the power core can finally run at full capacity. Dumbledore moved closer, peering at the complex circuit diagrams. Snape melted into a shadowed corner as usual, replaying the fight in his mind. Everything seemed routine until Jason's brow tightened. His gaze had fixed on a corner of the display, a faint, almost negligible energy reading, weaker than a magic lamp. If not for Zero's precision, it would have been ignored. "What's wrong?" Dumbledore asked, noticing the change. "An unregistered energy source." Jason tapped the display, enlarging the trajectory. "It came through the teleportation gate with you. Snape stiffened, wand already in hand. A parasite? Doesn't look like it. Jason shook his head. Its composition is very simple. No aggression, no complex mental signature. It's more like a rock that hitched a ride. He switched the image to a live feed from the signal's location. On the floor of an empty metal corridor, a fist-sized, dull gray pebble rolled oddly across the smooth surface, ignoring normal physics and moving persistently in one direction. Energy hub, elemental pool, Dumbledore said at once. It's being drawn to the power. Jason's expression turned amused. Let's go meet our stowaway, principal, professor. They went to the heart of the floating city, the elemental pool. The giant basin glowed with layered elements, and filigree patterns carried power to every corner. The air here crackled with elemental particles far purer than the meditation chambers they'd used. At the edge of the pool, the dusty pebble sat, absorbing every wisp of aura it could. Dumbledore and Snape recognized it immediately as the sort of rock common to the Earth elemental plane. What is it? Dumbledore asked, intrigued. An unhatched life form. Jason answered. As he spoke, the pebble began to pulse with an earthy yellow light. Cracks spidered across its surface with faint sounds, and from the fissures, 2 stubby arms and 2 shorter legs pushed out. A round head appeared on top, and it straightened up. A palm-sized humanoid construct of stone stood before them, a yellow crystal core glowing at its center, its 2 eyes twin pinpricks of light blinking curiously at the towering figures. An elemental spirit? Dumbledore's surprise turned to delight. Yes, a very young rock spirit. Jason explained. These nascent elementals are common in the Earth elemental plane. They're not very intelligent, just instinctively drawn to energy. Most get eaten by larger elementals or crushed before they mature. He watched the creature reach out to a pattern of energy, glow all over, and beam with simple contentment. This one was lucky. It must have been attracted to the gate's surge, latched on, and ended up in a perfect environment. The city's energy hub provided almost limitless nourishment. Snape's face hardened. A low-level elemental will keep consuming our power. Negligible, Jason said, spreading his hands. Right now its appetite is about the same as a table lamp, and it isn't without benefits. The rock spirit recoiled at Snape's tone, hiding behind a stone pillar and peeking out with only its 2 light points visible. Dumbledore chuckled at the little creature's mannerisms. What benefits? Jason leaned in. As a pure Earth elemental life form, it helps stabilize and purify Earth element energy. Having it here will smooth the elemental flow and slightly increase conversion efficiency. Most importantly, he added, looking at the tiny being with a different kind of calculation, elementals grow unpredictably. Given enough energy, who knows how far it might develop. Someday it could even be a guardian of the city. Snape's expression shifted subtly at the word guardian. He considered it, but offered no objection. Comforted by that, the rock spirit grew bolder. It shuffled from behind the pillar, scurried up to Dumbledore's robes, and touched them with a stone hand. Then it darted to Snape's boots, hesitated at the cold stare, and still reached out before retreating to the pool's edge. It found a comfy spot, glowed softly, and curled up to sleep with a contented hum. The moment lightened the metallic city. It seems to like us, Dumbledore said, smiling. It's testing who the strong ones are. Jason shrugged. Its instinct tells it you're both powerful and not to be trifled with. What about you? Dumbledore teased. Jason smiled, came to the pool's edge, and reached out. He touched the rock spirit's smooth head and injected a little arcane energy, carving a simple rune to help it circulate and absorb power more efficiently. The creature rolled over and emitted a low, pleased purr. Welcome, little one, Jason whispered. From today on, you'll be called Pan Shi, a simple name carrying quiet hope. Thus the floating city gained its first non-human resident, a lost little being from another world. 163. Breath of the Elemental Sea Meditation Room. No talent, no problem. A few days later, the floating city's first public high-level meditation room officially opened to core members. The news was like tossing a brand new exploding bonbon into the Weasleys' kitchen. It set off a chaotic chain reaction among Harry, Ron, Fred, George, and even Sirius. They followed Jason down a metal corridor inlaid with glowing runes. It didn't have the crushing, oppressive weight of the top-tier room Dumbledore and Snape had entered before, but the wave of energy that swept through them still stopped the group in their tracks. Whoa. Ron's mouth made an O. I feel, Fred breathed dramatically, like a sponge dropped into a honeypot. No, Fred, George corrected, equally entranced, we're two sponges. The comparison wasn't just joking. The air itself felt viscous, every breath like inhaling warm, sweet-smelling honey. Their skin tingled as if tiny points of light grazed and penetrated it, sending waves of warmth through them. The elemental concentration here is about 50 times that of the outside world, Jason said by the door, briefly explaining. It's directly connected to the elemental pool of the energy core. It's been diluted for public use, but it's more than enough for daily cultivation. Sirius drew a long breath and color returned to his face, which had been gaunt from years in confinement. He felt the dry, depleted channels of his magic being tenderly nourished and gave out a small, thankful sound. 50 times, Harry murmured, waving his hand experimentally at the air. It felt like invisible resistance, or assistance, as if he could scoop up magic from the room whenever he wanted. George, did you hear that? Fred's eyes flashed. He threw an arm around his brother's shoulders. 50 times! If we developed an instant skip class candy here, the activation time would be 50 times shorter. Then we'll have to print on the wrapper. Side effect. May cause you to skip to the next semester, George said deadpan. Ron didn't join their scheming. He stood with his hand outstretched, trying to grasp what was invisible but undeniably there. Magic had always been something he needed to reach for. Here, the frosted glass barrier between him and it shattered. Everyone found a cushion and sat down to meditate under Jason's guidance. Harry fell into a clear, flowing state almost immediately, his mental world sharper than ever and magic moving through him like a stream. Sirius meditated like a parched sponge, greedily drawing the surrounding energy in to repair parts of himself he hadn't known could be mended. The twins, however, treated meditation like a brainstorming session. Huddled together, whispering with barely concealed excitement, they compared sensations. I taste something spicy, like fire whiskey. Mine's crackling, like static. Imagine bottling this into candy. Everyone who eats it will have their hair stand on end. We'll call it hair-raising candy. They weren't cultivating so much as product testing the world's raw materials. For them, the elements were not power, but premium undeveloped ingredients. Ron's experience diverged completely. When he closed his eyes to sense the magic, his inner world erupted. Countless tiny fire-red motes, like a swarm of summer fireflies, danced around him. They weren't vague theoretical bits of flame anymore. They felt alive, concrete, sliding down his throat with each breath. Inhale. Exhale. He sat there and, without any effort, his strength grew. So that's what it feels like, he thought, opening his eyes to a sharpness he hadn't noticed before. He rose, almost on impulse, and pulled out his wand. Ron? Harry looked up in surprise. Ron's attention was fixed on his fingertips and the wand tip. An idea formed. Incendio! Whoosh! A thick, scorching pillar of fire burst from the wand like an angry dragon, arcing perfectly and smashing into the meditation room's specially made wall. Sparks showered everywhere, and the room filled with a warm, fiery glow. Harry and Sirius stared. Merlin's beard, Fred whistled. Ron, are you trying to use this place as a fireplace? Perfect fire, George said, rubbing his chin with a merchant's grin. Our new never-extinguishing portable swamp needs a charm like this for testing. Ron barely heard the teasing. His hands trembled, not with fear but with raw exhilaration. He tried again. Incendio! The pillar rose again. Once, twice, 3 times. Casting spells had ceased to be an arduous process of incantation and wand work. It had become instinctive, as natural as lifting a hand or blinking. A wide, genuine smile spread over Ron's face, a confidence Harry had never seen before. He laughed and turned to Harry. Harry, did you see? I did it! I saw it! Oh my God, Ron, that's... Harry began, genuinely happy for him. Outside the room, Jason watched through a monitoring screen, and his face darkened. This is a meditation room, Ron. You'll disturb other people if you keep that up. One more spell, and I'll throw you out, he warned. Sorry, I'll stop. I'm just too excited. Ron sat back down and quieted immediately. Hearing Jason, the twins sobered as well, and actually began to meditate properly. In the face of the breath of the elemental sea, differences in innate talent flattened. Here, mediocrity didn't mean being left behind. It meant different paths of growth. When Sirius emerged from the room, Jason asked, "How do you feel?" Sirius looked healthier than when he'd gone in, but exhaustion still lined his face. "Better," he said, stretching. "Like a layer of rust has been scrubbed away, but it's not enough." Jason was blunt. "Your body has been overdrawn. 10+ years in Azkaban took more than your magic. It ate at your life essence. This advanced meditation room can nourish you safely, but it won't heal you fast enough." "Can I go to the one you and Dumbledore use?" Sirius asked, hopeful. "No." Jason shook his head. "The energy there is too violent right now. For you, it's not a tonic, it's poison. Your body is like a cracked riverbed. A flood would collapse it. I won't allow anyone below Tier 1 in there for that reason. It would do more harm than good." He offered a plan. "You need several months, alternating between intermediate and advanced rooms, to restore your basic condition. Only when your body can withstand larger energy impacts should you consider the top-tier meditation room." Or, Jason added with a look of expectation, "wait until he himself reached third-tier Arcanist. By then I may be able to use demigod-level power to perform a deep repair, soul to body. That would be a true cure." "Demigod level? Can people really become gods?" Sirius asked, puzzled. Jason smiled. "Nothing's impossible now. There was only one world before, and now there's more. We keep moving forward." Sirius fell silent, watching Ron, still buzzing nearby, Harry smiling, and the twins, who were already whispering new product ideas. The impatience in his eyes softened, replaced by a steady resolve. He had a goal, he had hope, and he had the patience to wait. Life in the floating city had only just begun. Here, everyone's future was being rewritten. While Ron, Fred, and George were still buzzing about the dramatic improvements the advanced meditation chamber had brought them, Hermione Granger had already tracked down Jason, clutching a thick notebook. She was genuinely pleased for her friends, but her academic instincts would not allow her to rely on passive, immersive growth. She needed to understand the principles, grasp the rules, and then optimize the process. "Jason," she said without preamble, her eyes bright with curiosity. "I watched Ron's flame charm practice. That improvement looked almost qualitative. But I don't think an environment that only boosts raw energy concentration is the best fit for me." Jason paused and looked up with interest. "Tell me what you mean." "My magic leans heavily toward transfiguration and other structurally complex spells," Hermione explained methodically. "Those require not just a lot of energy, but precise control and exact shaping of form. If the room just floods you with energy, it could actually interfere with the fine control needed for detailed casting, causing spells to deform or fail." Jason smiled approvingly. "Very perceptive, Hermione. That's exactly the kind of insight that matters." He stood and made a welcoming gesture. "It sounds like the standard advanced meditation chamber won't do. Come with me. I've prepared another facility." Hermione's eyes lit up. Jason led her to a room that could not have been more different from the meditation chamber. There were no cushions or soft lighting. The walls were smooth, silvery metal. The floor was etched with intricate circular runes. Most striking was a control panel at the center, emitting a soft blue glow. "This is the advanced practice room," Jason said. "It's not for meditation, it's for application." He pointed at the control panel. "The meditation chamber is essentially additive. It boosts elemental concentrations, crudely increasing them 50-fold. This room works by proportioning." On the panel's screen were 4 sliding bars labeled Earth, Water, Fire, and Wind, each with a precise percentage to a decimal point. "Through this interface, you can adjust the concentration ratios of the 4 basic elements in the room," Jason explained. "You can keep the total at 50 times the ambient concentration, but vary the composition. Wind could be 70% or water 90%, with the rest made up by the other elements. You can create an extremely dry environment or one where the wind element is overwhelming." Hermione's breath caught. She instantly understood the implications. This room allowed her to sculpt the magical environment to suit each spell. "Transfiguration, at its core, involves reshaping material forms," she said, thinking aloud. "It needs magic to flow like wind to outline contours." Jason continued the thread for her. "And complex spells often need magic that's pliable like water to build precise internal structures." So, Hermione's fingers hovered over the panel. "I should set the environment with high wind and water and lower earth and fire?" Exactly, Jason said. Try it. Configure whatever you think will be best. I'm sure you'll surprise me. He left her alone in the room. Hermione breathed deeply to steady herself, then pulled out her notebook and began calculating. She didn't rush. She planned, refining proportions and reasoning through the mechanics of each spell she intended to practice. For Wingardium Leviosa, the core is imbuing objects with lightness and buoyancy. Wind should be dominant, 40%. No, 45. Water provides malleability for shaping, 30%. The remaining 25 split between earth and fire. She adjusted the numbers, then fixed them. Wind, 45%. Water, 30%. Earth, 12.5%. Fire, 12.5%. She confirmed the settings. There was a soft hum. The room's energy shifted. The air lightened palpably. Each breath felt threaded with tiny currents. A gentle moisture settled on her skin. The presence of water molecules made itself known. The oppressive weight of earth and the sharp heat of fire receded, replaced by agility and softness. Hermione drew her wand. Without needing to close her eyes and meditate, she could see the active wind and water element particles swirling more readily around the wand, responsive and waiting for direction. She cast a basic levitation charm. Wingardium Leviosa, a fallen leaf at the tip of her wand, rose. With Hermione's intent, it danced a precise waltz in the air, spinning, fluttering, stopping, gliding, each motion crisp and exact. Her control felt tenfold stronger. A smile spread across her face. This was what she'd needed. She pushed on, testing more complex control. Aguamenti! A jet of water erupted from her wand. Under her will, the stream did not spray aimlessly. It condensed into a sinuous water snake, coiling and swimming in the air. Hermione could shape the ripples on every scale of its body. Her finesse with magic had reached a new level. A bolder idea formed. If she could precisely control forms, why not combine spells structurally? She thought of defense. Protego was reliable, but flat and limited in coverage. It could break under strong impacts. If she could create a spherical water shield with Aguamenti, and then, using transfiguration techniques, make it spin rapidly, the result might not only defend, but deflect and even absorb incoming spells. Hermione's focus sharpened. She stood in the center of the room, wand raised. Aguamenti! A copious volume of clear water pooled in front of her. Shape! She applied transfiguration principles to bind and compress the liquid with an invisible lattice, coaxing it into a hollow, crystal sphere that enclosed her. That was the first part. Successful. Now for motion. Perspiration beaded at her temples as she concentrated, channeling the room's abundant wind into the sphere's outer shell. Spin! A steady vibration began. The water sphere rotated slowly, then picked up speed, faster and faster, until it became a roaring vortex of spinning water, its surface alive with ripples. Tiny droplets were flung outward by centrifugal force, pattering as they struck the walls. Hermione stood at the center, exhilarated. She had done it. She had created her first composite spell, the flowing water vortex shield. Outside, Jason watched via the monitoring feed and nodded with satisfaction. Ron's growth had been an awakening of raw strength, the twins' progress an explosion of inventive showmanship. Hermione's development was something different, the refinement and elevation of knowledge into practical power. The floating city offered each of them a route to the peak, and they were all growing stronger in their own ways. 165. The Dueling Club Trial. The end of the Lockhart scam. Hogwarts' Great Hall hummed with excitement for the second time that week. The long house tables had been magically shifted to the sides, and in the cleared center a new dueling platform, rhymed with protective runes, gleamed under floating candles. Professor Gilderoy Lockhart had announced the relaunch of the dueling club to teach self-defense, and the Great Hall was packed to see him in action. The younger students clustered near the stage, whispering and pointing. The girls in particular watched the figure in a forget-me-not blue robe with adoring, hopeful eyes, as if waiting for a hero. "Will he duel Professor Snape again?" a Hufflepuff girl asked, breathless. "I'd rather he fight Jason," another voice called from Ravenclaw. "That'd be a proper contest." Lockhart stood on the platform, basking in the applause. He spread his arms and turned, golden curls catching the light. "Quiet, children," he boomed, his voice lifted and magnified by a sonorous charm. "I am delighted to see such enthusiasm. Dueling is an art, elegant, dangerous, and above all, photogenic." He gave his signature smile, perfectly practiced for book covers. To give you a proper demonstration, he said, sweeping his gaze over the students until it rested, with a faint sneer, on Jason Lester. I will need an assistant. How about our prodigy in charms, Mr. Matt? Jason Lester? Lockhart thought it a masterstroke. Having the school's rising star beside him would only burnish his reputation. All eyes trained on Jason as he stepped up to the platform. He wore no showy robes, only his school uniform, but he carried a quiet authority that matched Lockhart's glamour. Professor, Jason said with a small nod, his tone cool, before we begin the demonstration, I have a suggestion. Oh? Lockhart arched an eyebrow, flashing a practiced smile. Do tell. What novel ideas does a young man have? Jason raised his hand. The air above the platform rippled like water, and a vast, crystal-clear magical screen unrolled into being. It was brighter and sharper than anything most at Hogwarts had seen, and it immediately drew every eye. This is... Dumbledore's eyes twinkled with a knowing look. Snape's lips curved into a rare, wicked smile. Lockhart's grin faltered. He felt, suddenly and instinctively, that something was very wrong. Before we learn a professor's dueling techniques, Jason said, his voice carried across the hall by a small charm, we should first confirm whether the professor's record is genuine. Next, please enjoy the documentary compiled by my assistant, Zero, Voyages with a Charlatan. The screen came to life. The first image showed an old wizard with white hair, missing teeth, and cloudy eyes, slumped in a shabby pub, muttering into a camera. Bandon, Banshee, yes, it was me. I used a pie-in-the-face charm to make her laugh herself to tears. Then a young man, he paid me a lot of money, asked everything. He had beautiful golden curls. The image cut to a book cover, Voyages with Banshees, with Lockhart's name emblazoned across it, and the blurb that he had driven off the Bandon Banshee with a Patronus charm. A ripple of murmurs ran through the hall. The footage changed. A wrinkled, dark-skinned witch sat by a fire knitting sweaters for a troop of Yetis. Oh yes, the Yetis. That was in Tibet. I made a household charm that tripped the creature up. It was clumsy. Later, a handsome young man found me so curious. He asked me about it. He was a charming fellow, she said. The screen switched again to a picture of Lockhart at a book signing for Voyages with Yetis, arms wide as he regaled fans with the tale of outwitting the Yeti. One after another, the hall watched the real protagonists of Lockhart's celebrated exploits tell their own stories. The anxious male wizard who actually dealt with ghouls because he could not bear cemeteries. A limping old woman who chased a troll away with a pot of boiling soup. A man allergic to moonlight who was the true source of the werewolf tale. Each account cut against Lockhart's famous, florid retellings, bare faces of genuine, unadorned heroes contrasted with Lockhart's glossy, stolen adventures. Confusion gave way to shock and then to anger. The girls who had once blushed at Lockhart's smile now looked pale and betrayed. Lockhart himself had gone from stiff pride to a whip of color draining from his face. Sweat darkened his exquisite robe. Lies, slander, he screeched, voice cracking on the last word as he flailed for a response. Is that so? Jason asked, voice calm. Then, Professor, please explain this. The screen dissolved and remade itself into an impossibly clear, magically restored video. In it, Lockhart stood over the limping old woman, wand raised, the same charming smile set now with something sharp in it. Obliviate, he said in the recording. A blue flash struck the woman. Her face went blank. The film rolled on, revealing other moments in which the same spell was used, memory after memory erased. Each victim's story had been taken from them, polished and printed under Lockhart's name. The sequence left no room for doubt. The documentary was a montage of theft, an archive of altered minds. The hall erupted. Gasps, cries, the shuffling of feet. Lockhart's composure shattered. He let out a high, keening shriek and snatched his wand. 166. The Oblivion Curse. Snape's perfect countermeasure. Irrefutable proof flashed on the screen. Lockhart's charming, smiling face saying the word obliviate. The great hall went utterly silent. The noise died away so fast it was like someone had sucked the air out of the room. For 3 heartbeats, no one moved. Then the silence shattered into a roar of fury and disbelief. Liar! A senior Gryffindor leapt to his feet, anger written all over him. He had always stood for courage and honor, and now felt violated. He used the memory charm on those real heroes? That's the lowest kind of theft. He's stolen other people's lives, a Ravenclaw girl cried, as if a sacred thing had been taken from her. Merlin's beard, he's a devil. I bought all his books. I'm going home to burn them, someone shouted. A disgrace to Hufflepuff. We don't accept him, another voice spat. Anger, contempt, scorn. The hall full of eyes fell on the trembling figure on the dueling stage. The adulation that had filled the room a moment before turned to loathing. The junior girls, who had once blushed at Lockhart's smile, were now crimson with shame and fury. Some began tearing up his autographed photos in their hands. No, it's not like that, Lockhart stammered. He fell apart. His carefully arranged golden curls were plastered to his forehead with sweat. His handsome face contorted until it was almost unrecognizable. All the smooth patter and quick improvisations that had sustained him failed when faced with this proof. His reputation, his wealth, everything he relied on was collapsing. It's a forgery. This is slander, he screamed, the only defense that came to him. That boy, he used vile magic to fake all of this. He swung to stare at Jason, the one who had exposed him. In panic and desperation, his vanity produced its most instinctive answer: make them forget. He drew his wand. Its tip flared a brilliant blue. Obliviate. He threw the word like a knife, the spell he had used so often to bury evidence of his crimes. But he didn't get to finish. Below the stage, Snape moved. Moved is the wrong word. He barely moved at all. He stood, hand rising in a casual, almost disdainful gesture. In his dark eyes there was contempt. As a first-order arcanist, in the activated clarity of his magic detection vision, Lockhart's casting was clumsy and ragged. The so-called memory charm was a loose, emotionally tainted scrap of magic. It wasn't even elegant enough to be called a proper spell. Snape's lips curved. He had been waiting. His wand thrummed once, a faint ripple of dark energy, almost invisible, slid through the air between Lockhart and his target, and then vanished. Arcane. Spell counter. He didn't need to mirror Lockhart's charm. He only had to inject a precisely structured opposite surge of breath of spiritual poison energy to break the spell's internal balance. The blue memory charm, which carried all of Lockhart's hopes, reversed in midair and came back faster than it had gone. With a soft sound, it struck Lockhart's forehead. For a second time, stood still. Lockhart's hysterical expression froze mid-plea. The mad, vicious light in his eyes evaporated and was replaced by emptiness, a childlike blankness. He blinked, looked at the wand in his fingers as if seeing it for the first time, then at the hundreds of faces staring up at him. He didn't seem to understand why they were watching. He smiled his familiar smile, tidied his sweat-damp hair, and gave the girls below the stage a lazy wink. The smile was hollow now. The wand slid from his limp hand and clattered on the wood. The hall erupted anew, louder than before, but the target of the uproar had shifted. All at once, the students turned to Snape. Awe, shock, and curiosity burned in those gazes. "My God, did you see that?" Harry breathed, looking at Ron. "No, didn't see it properly," Ron said, bewildered. "He didn't even say anything, and Lockhart's spell just bounced back." Hermione furrowed her brow, running through every textbook she'd ever read on dueling and defensive magic. "That wasn't Protego, and it's not any counter curse I've seen. It's not in any book." "It's brilliant," a younger Slytherin murmured, his admiration for his head of house visible for the first time. He didn't even move. Jason watched, unsurprised and unmoved. Snape's was flawless. The timing, the angle, the control of energy were exact. As expected of someone who had chosen breath of spiritual poison after promotion, such precision was instinctive. Dumbledore walked slowly onto the stage, paused to give Snape a meaningful look, approval at the corner of his eyes, and then swept his gaze over the hall. He never looked at Lockhart, who sat dazed and smiling at his own fingers. Instead, he addressed everyone present. "It seems today's dueling club has given us a most instructive lesson for defense against the dark arts," he said. "Sometimes the most dangerous dark arts are not curses, but lies." He raised his hand, and two aurors with stern faces appeared at the entrance, advancing into the hall. They seized Lockhart, who in his oblivious state kept asking them for their quills. "Gilderoy Lockhart," Dumbledore pronounced, "on multiple counts including fraud and malicious harm, you will be handed over to the Ministry of Magic for trial. You are dismissed from Hogwarts." A spectacle that had been eagerly anticipated ended as a trial. Students opened a path and watched without pity as Lockhart, the showman, was led away amid derision. Conversation in the Great Hall now swirled with praise for Snape's astonishing intervention. The farce had reached a tidy ending. But when Jason's gaze crossed the jubilant crowd, it met Dumbledore's. Neither man looked relaxed. Lockhart's downfall had removed only a petty obstacle. The public spectacle had conveniently distracted everyone from the deeper problem. The true danger that lurked within the castle, the conspiracy in the Chamber of Secrets, had quietly resumed its place in the dark. 167. New officer takes office. First defense lesson from the Arcanist Lockhart's farce ended in the most dramatic fashion, when the two stern-faced aurors hauled the thoroughly befuddled celebrity, still handing out signed photos, out of the Great Hall. The students erupted into long, sustained applause, as if celebrating a hard-won victory. Outside, the noise swelled. Inside the headmaster's office, the mood could not have been more different. The fire burned quietly. Dumbledore sat behind his desk, fingers steepled, a trace of deep thought in his blue eyes. Snape, as ever, lingered in the shadows, radiating cold and distance, though his gaze occasionally flicked to the window, replaying earlier events with the same clinical satisfaction as his students' reactions. An insignificant clown has left the stage, Jason broke the silence. That only means the stage is clear. It's time the real protagonist makes his entrance. Dumbledore looked at Jason and nodded. Lockhart's post is vacant. Until a proper successor is found, I will need a temporary replacement. The ministry will likely send another unsuitable man. I have a better candidate. Jason's eyes went straight to Snape in the gloom. Snape turned, his dark eyes sharp as an eagle's, and fixed Jason with a look that tried to pierce whatever motive hid behind the boy's words. The defense against the dark arts post was something Snape had wanted for years. Proposed now by Jason, by a muggle-born genius he had never liked, the offer left him conflicted. It felt less like an honor and more like a task wrapped in honey. Me? Snape's mouth thinned into a sardonic line. Mr. Lester, are you joking? Have a former Death Eater teach Hogwarts how to defend against the dark arts? Quite the opposite, Professor. Jason's expression held steady approval. Because you understand the dark arts, you know best how to defend against them. Besides, Jason's tone grew firmer. The Severus standing here now is not the one from the past. Isn't a First-Order Arcanist the right person for this role? We need an utterly reliable hand in Hogwarts' most vital security position. That will both educate the students properly and provide a controlled stage for the drama we intend to stage. The word Arcanist hit a soft spot. Snape's suspicion, previously bristling, softened a fraction. This was no mere personal favor. It linked to a new power structure. Dumbledore smiled with approval and trust. Severus, Jason is right. There is no one more suitable than you. I trust you. Snape was silent for a long beat. He looked at Jason, then back at Dumbledore. Slowly, he stepped out of the shadows into the light and gave a stiff nod. I accept. A week later, in the Defense Against the Dark Arts classroom, students entered with apprehension. Lockhart's cloying perfume still hung in the air, but it had been overtaken by the damp, chill smell of the dungeons. When Snape swept to the podium in his black robes, the room fell instantly silent. He offered no theatrical smile, no wasted words, only that cold, dissecting stare that cut through pretense. In the last month, he said, voice smooth and laced with contempt for his predecessor, you have learned nothing here except how to applaud a narcissist. A few girls who had swooned for Lockhart lowered their heads. Forget the rubbish you were taught, Snape continued. He tapped his wand against the desk. Lockhart's thick book, Voyages with Vampires, flew from a student's hands into the wastebasket and burst into ash. From today, you will learn true defense against the dark arts. It will not be elegant. It will not be photogenic. It may even be ugly, but it will allow you to survive an enemy who wants you dead. The oppression that settled over the room was different from Lockhart's gaudy discomfort. This pressure made students straighten instinctively. They could tell this was serious. Today, we will learn two of the most basic and essential skills, silent casting and intent perception. Snape's gaze swept the room, pausing for a half-second on a nearly invisible seventh-year Slytherin in the back. Elias Nott. Nott felt a chill, as if a venomous snake had fixed on him. But when he looked up, Snape's eyes had already moved on. He did not know that in that instant, Snape had flicked on the Arcanist's magic detection. In Snape's vision, the room was overlaid with subtle energy filaments. Nott's aura showed as a blot of dark fluctuation, a malice out of tune with the rest. The prey was there, obvious to the hunter. Silent casting is not merely omitting an incantation, Snape told them, pulling them back into the lesson. It is the extension of will, absolute control over magic. A mature wizard does not shout in a duel. That only reveals your intention and signs your death warrant. He raised a hand and told them to watch. A single drop of water appeared on his palm. Under his will, it elongated and shivered, freezing in midair. Tiny ice crystals unfurled from its center, growing in complexity until under every eye, the drop resolved into a perfectly formed crystalline snowflake, a complex hexagon that would shame any master alchemist. The snowflake floated silently, faintly cold. Only the students' small gasps broke the silence. Control like that was beyond their experience. With a casual motion of his fingers, Snape crushed the snowflake. It shattered into the finest dust and vanished. "This is control," he said. "Now, take out your wands and make a feather float. Those of you who cannot will miss dinner tonight." Time passed, and the Halloween feast arrived as planned. The great hall glittered with hundreds of jack-o'-lanterns. Live bats skimmed the vaulted ceiling, and platters overflowed on the house tables. Elias Nott picked at his steak, patience worn thin. Snape's elevation to temporary defense professor had tightened Hogwarts security, but that made any failure all the more dramatic. And Jason Lester, the Muggle-born prodigy whose reputation had soared, needed to be brought down. Nott found his excuse and slipped out of the noisy hall. A few minutes later, Filch's spine-chilling scream cleaved the revelry. "My cat, Madame Norris!" Panic spread. Students, following Filch's cries, mobbed the second-floor corridor and found a sight that stole their breath. Madame Norris hung stiff and lifeless from a torch bracket, her tail rigid, eyes wide. Beside her, written in blood and dark in the torchlight, were large words that glared ominously. "The usurper has been removed. The heir has returned. Traitors who betray their bloodline will be purged first." Silence fell. Everyone grasped the implication. The usurper pointed to the expelled fraud, Lockhart. The heir has returned invoked the legend of the Heir of Slytherin. And the last line, "traitors who betray their bloodline," was an indictment shaped precisely for Jason, the most famous Muggle born at Hogwarts, a living rebuke to pure-blood ideology. Accusations flared almost instantly. "It's him! It must be him!" shrieked a zealous older Slytherin, equal parts frightened and thrilled. "He's a parcel-mouth. The Chamber of Secrets is open again. He'll purge the school." Fear and prejudice were a quick kindling. A few students took involuntary steps away from Jason. Voices rose in counterpoint. "Are you insane?" a Gryffindor senior snapped. "Jason is our hero. He revealed the meditation and helped everyone get stronger. He wouldn't do this." "Exactly," a Ravenclaw girl said. "Why would someone who wants to purge traitors invent a meditation that empowers Muggle-borns? It makes no sense." "Right. This has to be a frame. Think of Lockhart. Jason exposed him. Someone could be trying to smear him in the same vile way." Supportive voices grew louder, many of them from students who had benefited directly from Jason's work. They pressed around him, defending him with looks and words, while others stared at the Slytherin who had started the accusation, suspicion in their eyes. The crowd split into factions. Argument, accusation, and defense braided into a tense, heated chorus. Through it all, Jason's face betrayed no panic. He watched. Those who defended him, those who glared with malice, then lifted his eyes to meet Dumbledore, who stood nearby, and Snape, who now loomed in the corridor's shadow as if he had always been there. A look passed between them, a quiet, unspoken understanding. The actors had taken their places. The audience below had begun to play its part. The show had officially begun. 168. Use the victim's tactics to defeat the enemy. Public reward from the victim. The chaos at the Halloween feast finally quieted only when Headmaster Dumbledore intervened. The professors shepherded students back to their common rooms, but the seeds of panic and suspicion had already been sown throughout Hogwarts. Only a few important figures remained in the second-floor corridor. Dumbledore tapped his wand lightly. Madame Norris, rigid as a statue, relaxed back into the shape of a cat, though she remained unconscious. He examined her and, turning to a tearful Argus Filch, said, "It's only Petrificus totalis, Filch. She's not dead. I'll have Professor Sprout prepare an antidote." Filch, cradling his cat, left the corridor in a flood of gratitude. With him gone, the atmosphere grew heavy and wary. From the far end of the corridor, a cold, drawn-out voice cut through the air. Lucius Malfoy approached, flanked by several governors, every movement arrogant and deliberate. His face wore a carefully measured blend of outrage and concern. His serpent-headed cane clicked insistently against the stone. "As soon as I arrived, I heard of this monstrous incident," he declared. His words echoed through the empty corridor. "An attack like this has taken place at Hogwarts, at the school my son Draco attends. We all saw the writing on the wall." The governors behind him chimed in with matching fury, all demanding swift action against the supposed culprit. Lucius's gaze slid over Dumbledore and fixed on Jason standing behind him. "Dumbledore," he said with righteous indignation, "for the safety of the students and for Hogwarts' reputation, I demand that Jason Lester, the prime suspect, be suspended immediately and handed over to the Ministry until the truth is established." It was a flawless performance, an accusation staged by those who wanted to see Jason fall. Severus Snape watched from the shadows, cool and unblinking. Even he could see the admiration and zeal for Jason shining in Lucius's eyes. But facing Lucius's pressure, Dumbledore didn't raise his wand. He turned, his pale blue eyes meeting the gazes of Lucius and the governors. An invisible, mountain-heavy pressure flooded the corridor, the weight of a higher authority in full force. The nobles froze, their arrogance stilled. The air seemed to harden around them, each breath suddenly difficult, their chests squeezed by an unseen hand. Lucius planted his cane firmly to keep from swaying. It was the Arcanist's pressure, the lingering potency of Dumbledore's recent elevation, still raw and barely contained, enough to chill these pure-blood aristocrats accustomed to power and luxury. "Lucius," Dumbledore said, calm as ever, each word landing like a hammered nail. "I am the headmaster of Hogwarts. Until conclusive evidence is produced, none of my students will be taken from this school by anyone." He turned to the pale-faced governors. "Now, take your demands and leave my school." The pressure faded as quickly as it had come. When the air resumed its normal flow, Lucius and the others were drenched in cold sweat. They looked at Dumbledore with a fear none of them had expected to feel. Lucius bowed his head deeply. "Yes, Headmaster Dumbledore, we will take our leave." The confrontation ended anticlimactically. The next morning in the Great Hall, the hangover from the previous night's panic made breakfast a tense, whisper-filled affair. Students exchanged rumors and kept sending suspicious glances toward the Slytherin table, toward Jason, who sat calmly slicing a sausage. Then Jason set down his knife and fork. He rose and, under the weight of hundreds of eyes, walked to the center of the hall. As he stood there, the murmurs quieted. Everyone watched, waiting for his defense or explanation. Jason scanned the room, taking in every face, then spoke. "I've heard I'm the prime suspect." That single line snagged everyone's attention. There was something almost mocking in his tone, a quiet disdain from someone secure in his strength toward a weaker imitation. Attacking the caretaker's cat, scrawling on the wall, what a show, a clumsy attempt to imitate me and, frankly, my greatest insult. Students exchanged astonished looks. "True power doesn't hide in gutters or target a cat," Jason continued, his voice rising with a natural, undeniable authority. "A true heir of Slytherin acts like thunder, open, unmistakable, honorable. Why would they choose such petty methods to announce themselves?" His words were like lightning, clearing confusion for many. The Slytherins especially began to shift. Suspicion toward Jason softened and turned into a spark of pride and allegiance. This was the demeanor they expected from someone worthy of their reverence. Jason raised one hand, palm up, and a heavy bag of galleons appeared as if summoned, the coins inside giving a crisp, enticing clink. "I, Jason Lester, hereby offer a public reward." His voice echoed off the ceiling. 1,000 galleons. A roar swept the hall. 1,000 galleons, enough to sustain a wizarding family comfortably for years, sent a palpable ripple through the crowd. 1,000 galleons, Jason repeated, his gaze hard as he scanned the students, to anyone who can expose the coward hiding in the gutters, or who provides decisive evidence that leads to his unmasking. The coins are yours. He tossed the bag to the floor where it burst open. Galleons scattered and flashed under the enchanted candles. "I'll be waiting here." Then, with the hall plunged into stunned silence, Jason turned and walked back to his seat, resuming his breakfast as if he hadn't just detonated a bomb. Public opinion flipped in an instant. Jason was no longer the suspect. He was the aggrieved party, a powerful figure defending his honor and turning every student into a potential informant. At the Slytherin table, Elias Nott gripped his knife and fork so tightly his knuckles went white. He was terrified and seething. Coward? Clumsy imitation? A rat to be exposed to scorn? Jason's words branded his pride like a hot iron. The frame-up he had so carefully arranged had not only failed to unnerve Jason, but had become the platform that let Jason display his dominance. Now he was the one publicly bountied, a target everyone would hunt. Rage and humiliation flared hot in Elias's chest. "No, I am not a coward. I am the true heir of Slytherin." He stared after Jason's relaxed back with bloodshot eyes. He had to act, something bolder, more direct, something that would prove him the protagonist of this story, exactly as Jason had intended. Jason sipped his pumpkin juice, a cold smile ghosting his lips. The enraged prey would soon leap straight into the trap. Jason's self-congratulatory speech humiliated Elias Nott like nothing else could. Every barb landed on the brittle edifice of pride that passed for his self-worth. Pure-blood glory, tradition, birthright. Coward? A clumsy imitation? Hiding in the gutters? Nott sat alone in the darkest corner of the Slytherin common room, firelight flickering across his face. The pages of advanced potion-making in his lap were creased where his fingers had gripped them too hard. His original plan had been perfect: use Filch's universally despised cat to create panic, then leave a blood-written message pointing the blame at Jason Lester. Mudblood. He had imagined Jason's reputation collapsing as suspicion and fear ate away at him. Instead, Jason had turned Nott's contrivance into a stage, preening and gaining praise, while Nott himself became the object of mockery. The humiliation hit him like ice. Rage and humiliation mixed into a single, hot need for retaliation. No, this could not stand. He was the heir of Slytherin, the defender of pure-blood honor. He would answer this insult with something far louder, far crueler, and unmistakable. Attacking a cat had been too tame. This time, he would use a living person as a lesson to all of Hogwarts and to that blasted Jason Lester. Challenge the heir, and you will die. His mind ran through targets until one stood out. Colin Creevey, a first-year Gryffindor, a typical Muggle-born and utterly naive about magic, always lugging that battered Muggle camera around taking pictures of his heroes. He was young, adored Harry Potter and Jason Lester, and most importantly, he was easy to find. Perfect. A few evenings later, the castle corridors were nearly empty. Colin walked toward the Quidditch pitch, excitement making his steps light. The Gryffindor team had extra practice. He wanted a shot of Harry in full flight. He hugged the old camera to his chest and rounded a corner. A hiss came from the wall beside him, soft at first and then clearer, like a snake unfurling. It made the skin along his neck prickle. Colin stopped and looked around. Only torches lined the corridor. Suits of armor stood at attention, the stone cool underfoot. Who's there?" he managed, voice thin. The hiss answered, cold and ancient. Colin's heart sped up. Rumors about the Chamber of Secrets echoed in his mind and fear squeezed his chest. He lifted the camera because it was the only thing that steadied him. Perhaps he could capture whatever was there. He peered through the viewfinder, scanning walls, pillars, empty armor. Then the lens caught a puddle on the floor. In the puddle's surface, something moved, twin, enormous yellow eyes glowing back at him. Panic stole his breath. He didn't have time to scream. A stiff, cold paralysis crept up from his feet and spread through his limbs. By habit more than thought, his finger pressed the shutter. Click. The flash lit the corridor for an instant. Colin froze mid-terrified expression, petrified as completely as the cat had been. The camera slipped from his hands and clattered to the flagstones. "Another filthy mudblood," said a voice from the shadows. Elias Nott stepped forward, every line of his face twisted with contempt and a hard pleasure. He crouched, picked up the camera, and inspected the fallen device. Writing on the wall had proved too indirect. This time, he wanted a direct signature, a provocation everyone would see. He drew his wand and murmured a dark, family-kept spell. Black smoke coiled from the tip and seeped into the camera's casing, burning and corroding plastic until in jagged, magical strokes a message appeared. "This is the consequence of challenging the air. You're next, Lester." When he was done, Knott felt a rush of triumph. He tossed the camera at Colin's feet and imagined the look on Jason Lester's face when he found it. Satisfied, he melted back into the shadows and left the corridor. "Someone fell here. Come quick." The scream brought a flood of students, and soon after, Headmaster Dumbledore, Severus Snape, and Jason. Colin lay on the floor like a statue, eyes wide with terror but breathing. Snape examined him and reported in a grim voice, "Petrified again. Like the cat, no threat to life, but completely frozen." Jason's eyes had been drawn to the camera at Colin's feet from the beginning. He picked it up and read the scorched words on the casing. He did not look angry. He did not look afraid. "Headmaster," he said, holding the camera up, "I think we've found the killer's confession." That night, in the floating city's central control room, Jason placed the camera on the analysis table and gave an instruction. 0. Analyze the magic imprint on this. Instruction received. Scanning initiated. A pale blue beam bathed the camera. On the projected display, a tangle of runes and data unspooled as the residual dark magic was parsed. The system decomposed the spell into its basic rune structure. Dark arts type, grudge imprint, low-level offensive charm, signature retains caster's mental fluctuation profile, the readout noted. Initiating magic fingerprint comparison, database match in progress. Snape had earlier run a class-wide recording, the students' magic fluctuation profiles captured during lessons. That registry, now the crucial reference file, churned through the imprint's signature. A few seconds later, a name and a student photo appeared on the central screen. "Match successful," 0 announced. "Target locked. Elias Knott, Slytherin, 7th year." Jason stared at Knott's sour face on the display. People blinded by fury made the largest, most foolish signatures of their crimes. What Knott had thought of as a brazen declaration of strength was, in Jason's view, a literal, signed confession, complete with the physical evidence and now a locked witness. The trap had been set. All the pieces were in place. 170. The Dean's summons. The real culprit revealed. Floating city, central control room. The pale blue screen filled Jason's vision. 2 intricate spectrographs of magical fluctuation rotated and overlapped in 3-dimensional space until their patterns fit together with uncanny precision. One set of data came from Colin Creevy's cursed camera. The other came from Zero's long-term monitoring and modeling of Elias Knott's daily magic dissipation. Lines of conclusive text scrolled beneath the graphs. Mental fluctuations matched, energy structure from the same source, curse residue characteristics identical. Finally, a figure was highlighted in bold, similarity 99.9%. Zero's synthesized voice concluded the analysis. Jason stared at the report without change in his face. The data alone would convict Knott in any magical court. Still, Jason knew how hollow raw numbers could feel in the wizarding world. He needed an irrefutable moment, an instant that would tie the cold data to a living, breathing culprit. He connected to Snape. "Professor, the fish has taken the bait. It's time to reel it in," Jason said. From the potion master's dim office, Snape's thin lips compressed, then the corners of his mouth lifted in the faintest malicious arc. "Coincidentally, I have an academic matter that requires a private discussion with my excellent student." A paper crane landed soundlessly on Elias Knott's Ancient Runes textbook. When its wings unfolded, it became a parchment note in Snape's unmistakable hand. "Mr. Knott, come to my office at 9 o'clock tonight." SS Knott's chest tightened for an instant. Then he composed himself and scanned the room with a practiced, casual look to make sure no one had noticed. A summons from Snape. He ran through possibilities. A setup? An ambush? No, he had left no traces. The only sensible explanation, he decided, was that his talent in ancient runes had finally drawn the dean's attention. Pride warmed him. This would be another chance to prove himself. He folded the note away and kept his expression cool. At 9 o'clock on the dot, he knocked and entered on Snape's invitation. The office was dim, candles guttering in the corners. Jars of specimens distorted in the low light, their outlines seeming to move. The sharp tang of formaldehyde mixed with the richer, bitter scents of potion ingredients. Snape sat behind a heavy desk, most of him swallowed by shadow. Only his black eyes were clear. unreadable, cold. "Dean, sir," Nott said and bowed. "Sit," Snape said. For several minutes, Snape fired difficult questions about translation and nuance in ancient runes, and Nott answered them fluently. His tension eased. It genuinely seemed like an academic examination. Then Snape shifted the subject without warning. He extended a pale finger toward an object at the corner of the desk. Colin Creevy's camera, its casing still scarred by a dark curse. A faint confundo aura blurred its details, but the sense of malignancy remained. "Mr. Nott," Snape said flatly, "your ancient runes grades show a gift for curse analysis." He leaned forward. "I have here an item submitted by a student attached to an unknown evil curse. Use Revelio Specialist to examine its nature. Consider it an extracurricular exercise." Nott's pupils pinched shut for a heartbeat. That camera. His throat tightened, but his face betrayed nothing. He thought fast. Refusing would be a flag. An excellent student's refusal to assist the dean would look suspicious. Agreeing should be low risk. Snape would only be asking him to reveal, not dispel, and the malicious imprint he had used was obscure, virtually unknown in Hogwarts records, so Snape couldn't recognize it. It was a test, Nott told himself. Backing down would be worse. "Of course, Dean," he said. He stood, forced his unease into a composed posture, drew his wand, and stepped to the desk. He inhaled slowly and cast Revelio Specialis. A soft white light spilled from his wand and washed over the camera. Nott pushed his magic into the device, probing, analyzing the curse he had planted. In Snape's slate-calm eyes, a cold light finally flickered. Having been promoted to a first-order arcanist, his perceptive faculties were keener than they'd once been. In the field of his magic detection, he smelled a distinct texture in Nott's casting, cold, arrogant, laced with deeply concealed malice. That unique magical fingerprint matched, with perfect alignment, the signature labeled malicious imprint in Zero's report. The virtual match and the live confirmation closed the final loop. Nott finished the spell and was about to report his findings, a rare, corrosive, malicious curse, when a voice cut behind him, cool and amused. "Well done, Mr. Nott." Snape's tone held a satisfied malice. "Your magic imprint is very distinctive. Exactly the same as a murderer I have been looking for." Nott's mind seized. All thought evaporated into a stunned blank. There was a click as the office door locked by invisible force. Silver restriction runes flared along the walls, sealing the room. His face drained of color and went ashen. He looked at Snape, at those black eyes that seemed to pierce to the marrow, and felt ice crawl up his spine. The blood in his limbs seemed to congeal. He could not move. He knew in that cold instant that it had never been a test. It had been a trap, laid from the moment the paper crane touched his book. He had nowhere to run. 171. Showdown time. Judgment from God's perspective. Inside Snape's office, restriction runes sealed every inch of the room, muffling sound and keeping prying eyes out. Elias Nott stood in the center, hands and feet suddenly cold, his mind blank with terror. This was a trap. He'd been lured here by his dean in a way he couldn't understand. Desperation left him frantic for any scrap of hope. Green flames flared in the fireplace. Two figures stepped out calmly, one after the other. Dumbledore led, his usual benevolent smile gone, replaced by an austere, mountain-like authority. Behind him was Jason Lester, unreadable and cold. Jason didn't bother to look at Nott, as if he were no more than a spare piece in the room. The three formed a triangle around Nott. Snape as the merciless enforcer, Dumbledore as the majestic judge, Jason as the cold prosecutor holding every piece of evidence. It felt absurd and overwhelming all at once. Nott forced himself to speak, the edge of panic making his voice sharp. "What do you want? You can't imprison a student without evidence. This isn't Hogwarts procedure. My father is—" "Evidence?" Jason interrupted, a trace of almost contemptuous pity in his voice. He raised a hand, and in midair, a magical display unfolded, clearer and larger than the one at the dueling club. Cold light flowed across it, composed of countless runes and data threads. "Elias Nott?" Jason said like a judge reading a verdict. "Now, please enjoy your own performance." The screen lit up. A precise three-dimensional, moving map of Hogwarts appeared. A red dot tracked a path through the castle. Nott watched the red dot, his own movements, leave the Great Hall, slip down a second-floor corridor, and wait in an empty classroom for 13 minutes and 26 seconds. He saw a recording of himself speaking parcel tongue to the stone wall. The screen traced the energy fluctuations as the basilisk crawled from the pipes and petrified Madame Norris. It documented the entire process of the blood message being scrawled on the wall. Every action, every timestamp, down to the millisecond. No, this is impossible. Knott's color drained. How could you? Jason flicked his finger and the image shifted. A different evening showed the red dot waiting in a corridor, ambushing Colin Creevy as he passed. The whole thing was recorded. This is fabricated. It's slander. Knott shrieked. The sensation of being watched by an omniscient eye, every move dissected, pushed him toward hysteria. Is that so? Jason sneered. The screen switched again. Two complex energy spectrum analyses filled the display. The left graph was labeled Basilisk Residual Magic Fluctuation. The right, homologous energy detected from target, Elias Knott. The peaks and troughs and frequencies matched almost exactly. Energy spectrum similarity, 99.9%. If the movement map had shocked him, the energy analysis shattered him. Basilisk magic, of all things, was now part of the proof. This was no mere surveillance. It felt like a god's perspective. It's not over yet. Jason's voice was the tolling of a final bell. The display shifted for a third time. On the left appeared the magical signature, the fingerprint, of the malicious inscription on the wall. On the right, under Knott's panicked gaze, another magical fingerprint began to construct in real time, sourced from the magical fluctuations Snape had recorded when he rendered himself visible. The two signatures rotated toward each other, then aligned, then overlapped perfectly. Magic fingerprint comparison complete. Similarity irrefutable. Knott stared at the screen, mute, the 100% burned into his vision as if reducing every last defense to ash. His excuses, his pride, his claims of conspiracy, all collapsed beneath a level of evidence that transcended ordinary understanding. This was not a trial, it was a demonstration of absolute dimensional scrutiny. Now, Jason said, watching Knott's bloodless face, do you have anything else to say in defense of your foolishness? Knott's legs gave out. He collapsed to the floor, throat making a choking sound. His mental resistance was gone. Then pressure fell over the room, heavy as sea and mountain. It was Dumbledore, now radiating the presence of a first-order arcanist, an authority of a higher order. The air thickened, light itself seemed to warp. Knott felt an invisible hand pressing him down, his soul shuddering on the instinct of life. The purest fear, the fear of being utterly powerless, broke the last of his resolve. Why? He gasped, eyes bloodshot with madness and despair. Why is this happening? I am the heir. I am the glory of pure blood. Desperation tipped him into a final, wild act. Knott's face twisted into a strange smile. From his robes he drew a jet-black ring, its surface carved with a coiled snake. Do you think you've won just like that? He spat. He slid the ring on, and driving every word with a raw, ancient cadence, hissed an old parcel tongue command. Kill them all! Kill all the dirty bloodlines! The snake eyes on the ring flashed crimson. A cold, vicious power centered on him and erupted like a roar. Scarlet light erupted from the coiled snake ring, lighting Elias Knott's face in a hellish glow. He looked like a demon returned from the depths. Do you think you've won like this? He rasped. Knott laughed, a sharp, hoarse sound full of the reckless desperation of a man with no roads left to travel. He was defeated, utterly, irretrievably, his pride and schemes and family legacy reduced to a grotesque joke. Since there was no turning back, then let us all be destroyed together. I am Slytherin's heir. I am, he cried. He bit his tongue until pain flared and a metallic taste filled his mouth. Spitting a mouthful of blood onto the heavy stone wall of Snape's office, he used the ancient diluted lineage in his blood as a conduit. Come out, he snarled, hissing in parcel tongue with every ounce of strength left. With my blood as guide, with my soul as sacrifice, hear my call, my great servant. Come out! Kill them all for your true master. The air in the office turned suddenly cold. The ring on his hand pulsed like a malignant heart. The entire castle trembled as if awakened from millennia of sleep. From deep within the dungeons came the heavy scraping of some vast thing moving through ancient stone conduits. The sound grew, closer and louder. Dust rained down, the blood-streaked wall in Snape's office spiderwebbed with cracks that spread fast. But the three other figures in the room, Dumbledore, Snape, and Jason, showed no panic. Snape's lip curled with cold contempt. So you finally called that big worm you keep in the sewers? I thought you'd take that secret with you to Azkaban. Dumbledore's blue eyes were calm as an old well. He raised a hand, and an invisible arcane barrier unfolded to shield the office, ensuring the disturbance wouldn't spread through the castle. It seems our preparations were not wasted, he said quietly. Jason had watched Nott from the beginning, like someone observing a minor player finish his lines. When Nott searched their faces for fear and found none, madness on his features gave way to confusion. This wasn't what his script had promised. Shouldn't they tremble under the basilisk's gaze? Afraid? Jason scoffed. What is there to fear from a creature not even first order? We have been waiting for this moment a long time. From the moment Nott made his move, they had baited this trap. The evidence, the investigations, the trials, all meant to force out his final card. To make him summon the basilisk he kept hidden and lure it into the perfect killing ground they had prepared. With a thunderous crack, the stone wall could bear no more. Stones scattered, blocked by the arcane barrier, but from the breach emerged a massive dark green scaled head, a snake's head larger than a man's torso, its great yellow eyes glinting with a deathly light fixed on everyone in the room. The 1,000-year-old basilisk had come, and its lethal gaze was ready. Nott slumped to the floor on the verge of fainting, a crazed pleasure flashing across his face. He imagined their faces turning to cold stone beneath that gaze. His trump card, his last ace, finally, he thought. The scene did not unfold as he had expected. The so-called battle was nothing more than a cold demonstration of how an arcanist handles a threat. Step 1. Absolute control. Dumbledore, standing directly in front of the oncoming gaze, did not flinch. He reached out and took hold of the invisible murderous intent like a man squeezing a wilting vine. Time seemed to pause. The basilisk's killing stare slammed against an unseen, insurmountable wall. Before Nott's disbelieving eyes, the gaze was twisted in midair and crumpled away. The great serpent's massive body, charging forward, froze as if the very space around it had turned to stone, its hiss choked into a muffled whimper. This was no ordinary spell. It was an arcanist's direct interference with the fundamentals of space. Step 2. Precise disablement. With the beast immobilized, Snape's shadowed eyes flashed. He unleashed an arcane beam, condensed to surgical sharpness, from his fingertip. It struck the basilisk's slightly parted, glowing green fangs in a blink. The beam penetrated and vanished, but it had done its work. The complex magical structure of the basilisk's venom, poison potent enough to destroy Horcruxes, was analyzed and dissolved at its root. The venom's lethal properties were stripped away. What remained was ordinary protein. Snape had surgically neutralized another of the serpent's deadliest weapons. Step 3. Complete purification. The giant beast, disarmed and frozen, hung in the air like an experimental specimen. Jason, an only second-order arcanist present, had been suspended in midair through the whole maneuver, studying the creature as if it were a curiosity. He simply snapped his fingers. The snap echoed in the silent office. In the center of the basilisk's brow, a tiny, almost imperceptible golden spark, as if not of this dimension, appeared. Sun, true fire. In Nott's dying vision, that spark became a sun 1,000,000,000 times condensed, burning with impossible heat. The spark collapsed inward and annihilated. In an instant, the basilisk's massive, ancient body and the venomous soul that had lingered for 1,000 years were decomposed and purified down to their most basic material and energy. Billions of shimmering motes of light scattered like a dreaming swarm of fireflies and then were gone. From the moment it burst through the wall to the moment it vanished, the whole event lasted no more than 3 seconds. All that remained was a huge hole into darkness, and Elias Nott, his last mental pillar shattered, foaming at the mouth and tumbling into unconsciousness. Dumbledore touched his long silver beard and regarded the hole where traces of basilisk slime still clung to the stone. "It seems we've found the entrance to the Chamber of Secrets," he observed, as casually as remarking on the location of afternoon tea. He turned to Jason and Snape with a small, almost amused smile. "Shall we go see what interesting legacy our old schoolmate Salazar Slytherin left behind?" The oppressive tension evaporated. The focus shifted, seamlessly, from battle to exploration, anticipation of a 1,000-year-old treasure replacing the threat that had just been extinguished. 173. The legacy of the first ancestors and the bloodline shackles. The smoke of battle, or rather the dust from that one-sided purge, had not yet cleared. A huge, pitch-black hole yawned in the wall of Professor Snape's office like a wound leading to an abyss. The edges still bore the slime left by the basilisk's crawling, a faint fishy stench clinging to the air. Dumbledore, Snape, and Jason stood before it. Nott lay nearby, unconscious and utterly broken, ignored as if he were nothing more than refuse. All three of them were drawn to the secret that waited beyond the gash. Jason stepped first into the ancient tunnel the basilisk had carved. The passage was cold and damp, thick with the dust of 1,000 years and the unmistakable scent of snakes. The flagstones underfoot were worn smooth by the giant beast's repeated passage. In places, a slick moss had taken hold. "I never thought Salazar Slytherin would keep his pet in such a crude place," Snape muttered from behind, casting light from his wand. To him it looked more like a gigantic sewer pipe than the legendary Chamber of Secrets. "Perhaps the real secret isn't in the passage itself. Salazar wasn't a wizard to shortchange his work," Dumbledore said, his eyes alight with curiosity. The corridor wound downward into Hogwarts' underbelly. After about 10 minutes, the space opened abruptly. They stepped into a vast underground chamber, but it was nothing like the fearsome snake-carved Hall of Legend. Instead, it resembled an ancient research laboratory, abandoned for a millennium and steeped in the discipline of an arcanist. Soft white light pulsed from unknown crystals. Faded alchemical arrays and energy circuits traced intricate patterns across the floor and walls. Tall obsidian shelves held crystal vessels containing strange specimens, creatures never before recorded, preserved as failed experiments. Workbenches hewn from single blocks of rock were littered with rotted tools and rune slates whose energies had long since run out. This place gave off the aura of scholarship, of study and inquiry, rather than the lair of a fanatical pureblood zealot. "Legends love to exaggerate," Jason said, eyes bright with excitement. Everything about the room felt oddly familiar to him. For the first time since they entered, a pure expression of stunned confusion crossed Snape's face. As head of Slytherin, his understanding of the Founder ran deep. What lay before him shattered that understanding. At the chamber's center stood a podium carved from a single crystal, wrapped in a faint magic. Atop it lay a single thick notebook. The cover was bound in dark green leather with a fine scale pattern. The three of them recognized it at once: basilisk skin. Gilded elvish script glinted in the gentle light. "The Curse and Shackles of Bloodline Magic" by Salazar Slytherin. For a moment they all held their breath. That title alone could set the wizarding world ablaze. Jason reached out and easily broke the protective wards, their power nearly spent after 1,000 years. He lifted the notebook and opened it. The pages were made from a plant fiber that had kept them intact through the centuries. The handwriting was done in dragon's blood ink, bold and vigorous, and a faint spiritual force seemed to hum between the lines. "I was wrong." The first sentence made Dumbledore and Snape's hearts lurch. Slytherin wrote with a calm, almost brutal clarity about the discovery he had made late in life. He admitted that the pure-blood doctrine he had long espoused, born of fear and mistrust of Muggle persecution, had been a strategy of survival in its original context. But as his research progressed, he had come to see that the obsessive pursuit of purity had not strengthened wizards. It had become a curse. "Inbreeding narrows our bloodlines like stagnant water," the journal read. "Magic dwindles and calcifies across generations, losing vitality and creativity. I call this the bloodline shackles." The dwindling power of the ancient pureblood families, generation after generation, is proof of those shackles. They cling to perceived glory, blind to the fact that they are walking a path of self-destruction. Snape's hand tightened at his side. The words struck like thunder against the worldview he had been raised on, making his core beliefs tremble. The latter half of the notebook cataloged Slytherin's attempts to break those shackles. He had concluded that the key did not lie in bloodlines, but in something deeper: the soul. Bloodline is merely the vessel for magic. One passage read, "The soul is the flame that ignites it. While the quality of the vessel matters, the intensity of the flame determines the heights reached. I attempted to use soul magic to bypass the limitations of bloodline. to touch the very essence of magic and find a new way forward for our declining race. Attached were mountains of research, data on soul magic, notes on failed experiments, warnings, and hopes addressed to future generations. He actually reached this point, Dumbledore whispered, awe and regret in his voice, for the pioneer who had come to these conclusions 1,000 years ago. For Jason, the reaction was different. His earlier excitement deepened into something close to fanatic joy. This was a revelation that fit perfectly with the Arcanist path he was following. Slytherin's late-life research offered not only an intellectual refutation of pure-blood supremacy, an ideological weapon against the conservative forces that clung to it, but also a clear, monumental research direction. Find a way to break the bloodline shackles for all wizards and lift the entire race to a new plane. It was Salazar Slytherin's most precious legacy. At the same time, in the Ministry of Magic, Cornelius Fudge paced his office, green bowler hat askew and his jowls wobbling with each step. An assistant burst in, breathless. "Minister, latest news from Hogwarts. The crisis has been resolved." "Resolved?" Fudge stopped, not surprised but stunned. How was it resolved? Was the culprit caught? What of the monster? It was Dumbledore, Professor Snape, and Jason Lester. They worked together. It was Salazar Slytherin's basilisk. The castle is safe. Fudge's face soured instantly. Safe, without the Ministry's involvement and with no credit left for him? He bristled at the thought of being sidelined. "Prepare the car. At once," he barked, trying to force authority into his tone. "I'm going to Hogwarts immediately, to handle the aftermath in person, to ensure the school's absolute safety." The announcement revealed his priorities plainly. His concern was less the crisis itself than being present to claim its resolution. His bureaucracy, not the well-being of the students, moved him to action. In Slytherin's secret laboratory, the words in the Millennium Journal still echoed in the minds of the three who had read it. Dumbledore had just finished casting the spell to seal away the curse and shackles of bloodline magic, a book that could overturn the entire magical world's understanding, when the fireplace in the headmaster's office erupted in emerald green flames. News like this could not be contained. The startled portraits and the few ghosts who saw the basilisk crash through the wall had already passed the story along with shocking speed. The first to step out of the flow was the Minister of Magic, Cornelius Fudge. His pinstriped robes were rumpled, and his green bowler hat sat a little askew on his flushed, urgent face. Behind him came a short, plump witch in a pink cardigan, wearing that cloying, practiced smile that made the skin crawl. Dolores Umbridge, undersecretary to the minister. Two stern-looking aurors in black leather followed, their expressions pulled tight. "Dumbledore!" Fudge barked the instant he was out of the fireplace, not even bothering to brush soot from his sleeves. His tone was accusatory. "Such a major safety incident at Hogwarts. Why wasn't the Ministry informed immediately? Do you realize how much panic this could have caused?" His words filled the office like a bureaucratic thunderclap. He wasn't there to help. He was there to assert control. Umbridge piped up in her saccharine, irritatingly girlish voice, punctuating with a characteristic cough. "Ahem. Minister is right. The safety of the school must remain under Ministry supervision." Dumbledore, Snape, and Jason watched the performance with varying degrees of amusement and disdain. They had just glimpsed the knowledge of a pioneer from a millennium past. Now they were being harried by a man whose greatest fear was surprise. "Good evening, Cornelius, Dolores," Dumbledore said quietly as if greeting visitors. "Things happened rather quickly, but we've just finished the cleanup. Since you're here, perhaps you would like to see the scene for yourselves. It may help with your report." Fudge seemed briefly disarmed by the calm, even tone. He straightened his hat like a man searching for a script. "Lead the way. I must assess the severity personally and determine whether the Ministry should take over." They moved down the corridor in a stiff, silent line and rounded the corner into Snape's office. The sight made all prepared speeches choke in their throats. In the center of the room lay the colossal body of the basilisk, an impossibly huge serpent, scales the color of old pine. Even in death, its presence was ancient and terrible, but all eyes fixed on its head. At the very center of the basilisk's skull was a bowl-sized hole. The edges were not torn or bloody, but smooth and glass-like, vitrified to a sheen like polished obsidian, reflecting the lamplight with a strange inner depth. No known spell left wounds like that. Avada Kedavra left a green flash. It did not hollow matter into glossy, non-organic glass. Worse, the air hummed with residual energy, a scorching, purifying vitality that made the Orosbat wands warm in their hands, as if in salute to something greater. Fudge's face, a moment before flushed with indignation, went chalk pale. Umbridge's fake smile froze into an expression of raw apprehension. The pressure in the room felt like something touching their very souls. Their petty spells and departmental authority seemed, in that presence, like thin mist before a sunstone. Fudge swallowed hard, forcing himself back into the role of minister. He turned to Jason, the youngest of those present, and in Fudge's eyes, the most pliable. "You, Mr. Lester," he managed, voice trembling, "explain what happened here." Jason glanced at him once. That single look was enough to make Fudge feel suddenly small, like a man in a boundless plain staring up at a vast cold sky. Something in the young man's eyes arrested his breath for half a second. "This was a collaborative effort, Minister," Jason said. Dumbledore spoke then, as if easing a tense room of guests. "As you can see, conventional magic proved ineffective against this ancient creature. We were forced to employ a new kind of magic." Those 3 words, new magic, landed like a sledgehammer. For Fudge, accustomed to the neat, rule-bound world of the Ministry, the unknown was the true terror. He had weathered dark wizards and political storms, but a power with no precedent, beyond his control or comprehension, unseated him utterly. Hogwarts had used a magic of which he had never heard. The confidence drained from his face, and in its place came a servile, hurried smile. "Ah, yes, of course," he babbled out, stumbling among compliments. "I always knew, with Headmaster Dumbledore at the helm, any crisis could be resolved. Remarkable, truly remarkable." From his briefcase, he produced 3 small metal boxes he had evidently prepared beforehand, political trinkets, ready for use. "To commend you for your outstanding contributions to Hogwarts and to the safety of the magical world," he said, voice pitching high with nervousness, "the Ministry awards you the Order of Merlin, 3rd class." He practically thrust the boxes forward in his haste to buy security through ceremony. Umbridge's smile had long since gone. She stared fixedly at the vitrified hole, hands trembling invisible under her cardigan. Dumbledore, Snape, and Jason accepted the medals without expression. Snape's face gave nothing away as he opened the box, then flicked the medal onto the table with a contemptuous snort, as though the Ministry's honors were refuse. "Then, the cleanup and aftermath will be entirely left to the school," Fudge blurted, anxious to reaffirm his deference. "I trust you. The Ministry will not interfere further." With that, he practically fled, dragging a shaken Umbridge and the 2 Aurors behind him. They clattered toward the flue, flustered and in retreat. Silence settled back over the office. Dumbledore and Jason exchanged a look that conveyed more than words. Fudge's fear was only the beginning. That particular dread of the unknown would soon metastasize into political suspicion, watchdog committees, and obstruction. The Ministry had, quietly and irrevocably, become a potential problem. "All right," Dumbledore said, clapping his hands once to bring everyone's attention back. "Now that the annoying flies have left, let us turn to the real gains of this evening's work." Their gazes passed over the enormous, magnificent carcass of the basilisk and fixed instead on the dark hole in the wall, the torn passage that led to a millennium of secrets. 175. Arcane Alchemy. The floating city's great alchemy workshop dominated the lower industrial district. This was the heart of the city. The massive arcane furnace hunched like a dormant volcano, and labyrinthine energy conduits coiled across the dome and walls like steel serpents. The air smelled of metal, energy crystals, and potion ingredients. On the central platform lay something that made everyone around it hold their breath, the complete corpse of a 1,000-year-old basilisk. Even in death, its vast bulk radiated an oppressive presence. Its dark green scales caught the alchemy lights and shone with a chilling luster. Harry, Ron, Hermione, and the Weasley twins, core members of the team, all gathered around the platform, faces open with shock. They had faced Lord Voldemort's terror in person, but none of them had ever seen a legendary millennia-old beast up close. "Merlin's beard," Ron murmured. It's 10 times bigger than any illustration in the books. Every one of its scales is bigger than my palm, Hermione said, scholarly instincts piqued. With that level of physical defense, no wonder ordinary spells fail. Snape, however, was a different sight. He stared at the basilisk's corpse with burning intensity, almost feverish. He reached out and touched one of its fangs, feeling the residual magic, potent enough to corrode a soul. Perfect material, perfect activity, he breathed. Jason's voice cut through the charged silence, bringing everyone back to attention. The professor is right. He glanced around at the assembled group. This basilisk is Slytherin's problem, but it's also an unparalleled gift. Today we turn that gift into our strength. He raised his hand and gave a command. A circular array of countless precise runes flared on the platform, pale blue light flowing through them. A shimmering curtain of light swept slowly down the basilisk's massive body. As it passed, a miraculous scene unfolded. Scales, flesh, bone, teeth, venom glands, eyeballs, blood. Every material was separated with invisible, surgical precision. A complete basilisk hide rolled up like a scroll and floated into the air. 2 fangs, intact with their venom sacs, were cleanly peeled off. The blood coalesced into a deep red sphere, perfectly pure. The entire process was quiet, efficient, and lossless. Each component retained optimal magical activity, suspended and categorized for the next stage of processing. Snape watched, stunned. He remembered the bloody, brutal processes of cutting spells and the inevitable losses in mundane purification. The material decomposition before him exceeded everything he'd known. This is, he began, for once nearly speechless. The Arcanist's method, Jason said calmly. Analyze matter, reconstruct rules. He gestured. The 2 fangs, glowing dark green, floated into the arcane furnace. Golden sun true fire rose within the forge, wrapping the fangs without damaging their structure, purging 1,000 years' worth of rancor and impurity. Slowly they became translucent, like dark green crystal. Jason traced symbols through the air with his finger, and complex arcane runes, the rune of magic disintegration, were etched across their surfaces. Traditional basilisk fangs can destroy Horcruxes because the venom can taint the magical vessel that houses a soul, Jason explained as he worked. But arcane-enhanced fangs will do more. With these runes, they don't merely destroy the body, they disintegrate the target's magic architecture, crippling a wizard at the root. Minutes later, several daggers, about 20 centimeters long, ancient in style and lethal in intent, emerged from the furnace and hovered before the group. Jason named them Godslayer fangs. Harry, Ron, Hermione, Fred, George, 1 each, he said. These are trump cards. Use them only as last resorts in life or death situations. Harry took his dagger. It was cold in his hand, the blade's aura feeling sharp enough to slice through resolve itself. He understood that a weapon that small could rival any powerful offensive spell. Next, the vast basilisk hide was fed into the array and divided into hundreds of standard modules. Dragon-scale armor's defense is already excellent, Jason said as he worked, but its resistance to dark magic can be improved. He activated everyone's dragon-scale armor. Under precise energy weaving, the dark green basilisk modules flowed like liquid into the inner surface of the dark red armor, forming a new lining. The upgraded dragon-scale armor V2.0 kept its dragon scales on the outer layer to meet physical and elemental attacks. Inside, a lining of basilisk hide was specifically designed to absorb and deflect curses. "Fred, try it," Jason suggested. "Gladly," Fred cackled. He drew his wand and fired one of his newly invented prank spells, the full-body itching curse, at George's new suit. A yellow streak struck the armor. Nothing happened. The curse dissipated on contact. Like a droplet hitting a heated plate, there was a tiny sizzle, and then nothing. "Hey, where did my spell go?" Fred rubbed his eyes in disbelief. "I felt a tickle, then it vanished," George said, surprised as he shifted, unharmed. Everyone's gear had been upgraded. Pride and excitement swelled in the group. This was a visible leap in capability when top-tier materials met era-defining technology. It wasn't just a gap in strength anymore. It felt like a generational leap between civilizations. Finally, Jason's attention turned to the core elements, the purified basilisk venom and the beast's heart, which still thudded faintly. He sent both into the floating city's energy core beneath the workshop. The energy circuits throughout the facility pulsed and took on an eerie green glow. From now on, the floating city's energy shield will have dual damage reflection, Jason told them as data scrolled on the central light screen. Anyone who strikes the shield will suffer both a poisonous backlash and the effects of a fear-inducing gaze. The harder the attack, the stronger the backlash. Harry, Ron, Hermione, and the others watched, pride and a new confidence swelling in them. The Chamber of Secrets had been resolved, their equipment upgraded, and the semester was closing out on a high note. Jason looked over the team, satisfaction evident. All right, gentlemen, ladies. The last week of the second-year curriculum had settled over Hogwarts like a lazy holiday. In the residential wing of the floating city, the mood was unusually light. The danger from the Chamber of Secrets had passed, finals were over, and everyone seemed to be making up for lost rest. Harry and Ron were sprawled on a soft sofa, flipping through the latest issue of Quidditch Weekly and shaking their heads at yet another Chudley Cannon's defeat. Honestly, Harry, they should just sack the lot of them, Ron grumbled. Hermione sat nearby with a parchment suspended before her. An autoquill had scrawled a summer reading list so long it could have kept an ordinary wizard busy for years. Fred and George were tucked into a corner, whispering and snickering as they sketched out another mischievous invention. For most of them, it was the most carefree stretch they'd had in 2 years. Jason's voice cut through the easy chatter. Everyone, set down what you're holding for a minute. Quick meeting. They looked up. Jason's face was relaxed. He didn't seem like someone about to deliver bad news. Curious, they gathered around as he didn't bother with preliminaries. With a wave of his hand, a 3-dimensional holographic star map unfolded over the room. It wasn't the familiar solar system, but a scattering of strange planes, each bathing the map in a different elemental glow. The threat to Hogwarts has been temporarily eliminated, Jason said, his voice unusually crisp in the quiet room. But that doesn't mean we can sit back. He ran a finger across the map and stopped at a plane that radiated a heavy, earthen yellow. The view zoomed in, revealing a web of energy veins crisscrossing beneath the surface. This is the Earth Elemental Plane, he explained, a world of rock and crystal, pure earthen energy. He pointed out several nodes where the energy veins converged and shone the brightest. These are the richest mining zones for geocore crystals. They're the core energy source we need for the next upgrade to the floating city. Everyone leaned in as he revealed the plan that made faces light up. So I've put together a special training program for the summer holidays. A special summer practical class, a trip into the underground world, someone repeated. Practical class? Ron scratched the back of his head. That sounded much less dangerous than adventure. Hermione's brow nodded. Years of top student habits kicked in, and she raised a hand. Jason, this still sounds risky. It's an unfamiliar plane. We don't know anything about its atmosphere, gravity, or pressure. What if there are creatures stronger than a basilisk? Her questions echoed the group's worries. Jason nodded approvingly. They're valid, and that's exactly why I didn't announce this earlier. The preparatory work is finished. He waved again, and beside the holographic map images flickered into being. Pre-recorded logs of Dumbledore and Snape. In one, Dumbledore channeled brilliant arcane energy to disintegrate a massive rock elemental into pure light. In another, Snape unleashed precise rays that dismantled swarms of crystalline spiders. While we were dealing with the chamber incident, Jason went on, Headmaster Dumbledore and Professor Snape have already swept our target areas. Any Tier 1 elemental creatures or other high-threat entities have been cleared. In short, it's been prepared as a safe training ground for us. Relief visibly eased the group. So, we're not going on a wild adventure? We're going to a class? Fred said, beginning to grin. We're going to harvest, George added, eyes gleaming. Exactly. Jason snapped his fingers. And to be absolutely safe, he handed each of them a small, unassuming charm. These are environmental stabilization amulets made by the floating city. Once activated, they create a comfortable microenvironment around you, regardless of outside conditions. We could even throw a party in magma at the Earth's core. Hermione's last reservations melted. It had the feel of a short, high-tech, raid-style expedition into a beginner area, using technology well beyond its era. Jason continued, words designed to fan everyone's curiosity. The dangers may have been removed, but the place is still full of resources. The low-level elemental creatures left behind are perfect sparring partners. They act on instinct, not intelligence, so you can experiment with spells freely and hone your combat skills. He looked around the circle, confidence in his eyes. We'll go to harvest energy, learn to use the equipment, and improve our practical fighting abilities. Spend a month there, and your skills will be transformed, more progress than you'd make in a whole year at Hogwarts. The idea spread through them like wildfire. A chance to get stronger, to try new gear, and to spend the summer doing something both useful and thrilling. It was irresistible. I'm in! Ron jumped up first, flushed with excitement. Count me in! Harry followed quickly, face bright with anticipation. Sounds like a perfect place to test our new toys, Fred and George said at once. Hermione looked at them all, then down at the amulet in her hand, and finally smiled and nodded. It was unanimous. In that instant, the little team's aim shifted. They were no longer content to solve problems only on campus. Their sights had broadened. They would become a true plane exploration team. After brief farewells to Dumbledore and Snape and notifications to their families, Jason led the assembled group to the lowest level of the floating city. There, a vast portal framed by countless energy circuits sat silently. Ready? Jason asked, turning back to them. No one spoke aloud. The excitement in their eyes answered for them. Jason put his hand to the portal's central mechanism. Energy surged. The portal emitted a deep, resonant hum, and thousands of runes etched along its frame lit up one by one until they converged into a blinding core of light. As the glare dimmed, the center no longer looked like a solid barrier, but a slowly rotating vortex of deep earthen yellow. An ancient, desolate aura and the raw scent of earth energy rolled out from beyond the threshold. Let's go, Jason said. He stepped forward and entered the unknown. Harry, Ron, Hermione, and the others followed in quick succession. One by one, their figures were swallowed by the earthen yellow vortex, leaving the familiar campus behind as they embarked on a brand new expedition. 177. Entering a different world for the first time. The roar of steel beneath the ground, passing through the energy vortex, felt like being wrapped in a warm, viscous current. After a brief moment of weightlessness, their feet hit solid ground. Harry blinked open his eyes first and instinctively held his breath. They stood inside an immense underground cavern that defied description. There was no sky, only a dome that climbed into shadow, studded with enormous clusters of crystal. Those crystals glowed with a soft white light, bathing the whole subterranean world. The air smelled of crushed stone and soil and was thick with earth arcane. Every breath left a weight of energy in their lungs. Wow, Ron stared around, stunned. Are we inside some giant stomach? An invisible pressure squeezed them from all sides. Their bodies bore a crushing load. At the same moment, the environment stabilization amulets on their chests flared, projecting an invisible field that canceled the brutal gravity. They felt no discomfort. The gravity here is roughly 5 times the surface, Hermione said, holding a specialized detector and watching the numbers jump. Her face was all focus and analysis. The sulfur and silicon content is extremely high. Without protection, anyone would be poisoned in minutes. The amulet is a miracle. Jason watched their surprised, excited faces and nodded with satisfaction. Welcome to the Earth Elemental Plane. This is the outer perimeter of the safe zone Dumbledore and Snape cleared. It's our beginner training village. Remember, he added, the Earth Arcane here is exceptionally active. Any Earth or rock-related spell gets a huge power boost. That helps us, and it helps our enemies too. Before he finished, a massive lump of rock nearby shifted. It wasn't a boulder, something rose from the ground. A giant over 5 meters tall, composed of hard gray stone straightened up. It had no face, only yellowish-brown arcane flames burning at its joints, radiating raw, violent power. Target locked, Zeroth Order Rock Elemental Spirit blinked on Jason's retinal display. Perfect, one lone sparring partner, Jason said, casual as if they were planning a Quidditch play. Hermione, use the environment to bind it. Harry, stay mobile and tear open its defenses. Ron, Fred, George, prepare arcane missiles and wait for my command. Show me what your summer homework produced. Leave it to us. The Weasley twins flashed each other a grin and pointed at the target. The fight ignited. Arcane rune, earthbound prison. Hermione was first. With a surge of mental power, she sketched a complex purple rune into the ground. The instant the rune sank, the earth answered. Dozens of giant rock hands burst up from the soil and clamped around the elemental's legs. The spell's force was easily double what they'd seen in Hogwarts practice. The rock elemental roared. Its internal earth arcane pulsed, resonating with the ground, and it tore free from several of the stone hands, but it was still heavily restrained. "Hey, big guy, look here," Harry snarled. The energy circuits in his dragon-scale armor surged. An afterimage flickered where he'd been, and he vanished in a short-distance spatial blink. One moment, he was at the edge of the field. The next, he was at the elemental's side. He blinked repeatedly, a blur of motion, and each time he struck with the Godslayer dagger, sparks flying as the blade carved deep into rock. "Now, hit the joints," Jason ordered. "Arcane rock shatter missiles." Blue arcane light flared in the palms of Ron and the twins. 12 solidified energy missiles screamed out. As they flew, they tore rock from the ground into themselves, forming spinning, armor-piercing shells. Boom, boom, boom. The missiles combined energy impact with physical penetration and slammed into the vulnerable gaps Harry's strikes had opened. Explosions rocked the cavern. The elemental was hurled back, chunks of its joints fracturing, the yellow-brown arcane flames at its seams guttering. "Well done," Jason called. "Its core is exposed. Harry, finish it." "Got it." A cold light flashed in Harry's eyes. He blinked aside to avoid the elemental's desperate counterstrike, then used the momentum to reappear in front of its chest, where the glowing energy core pulsed within reach. He gripped the Godslayer dagger in a reverse hold. The dark green blade, forged from a basilisk fang, flared as the magic disintegration rune etched on its surface, activated at contact with the elemental's core. There was no resistance. Pfft. The dagger sank smoothly into what should have been an indestructible heart. The elemental froze. Dark green fissures spidered out from the blade, racing across the stone body. The elemental's internal magic structure collapsed and unraveled from the core outward. It let out a final ragged roar before its massive frame shattered into rubble. A basketball-sized elemental core, glowing the same yellowish-brown light, tumbled to a stop at Harry's feet. The fight was over. It had taken less than a minute. Ron stared at his hands in disbelief. "My arcane missiles, they actually pulled up rock out of the ground. They were more than twice as strong as in practice." "Of course," Hermione said, eyes bright as she ran an instant analysis. "Jason was right. This is the Earth Elemental Plane. Earth arcane concentration is extremely high here, so Earth and rock spells get a huge boost. My Earthbound prison didn't just bind it, we used the plane itself." They were still catching their breath when a low, rhythmic rumble rolled through the distant rock. Rumble, rumble, crack, heavy, metallic banging clawed through layers of stone, coming fast. Smiles vanished as the group snapped into combat stances. "What's that?" Harry asked. Jason narrowed his eyes. On Zero's scanning interface, a massive, high-energy metallic object was burrowing through the rock toward them, not an elemental at all. The sound built into a deafening roar. A section of the rock wall to their left exploded outward, sending debris flying. A monstrous steel machine burst through. It was over 10 meters tall, all brute force and crude engineering. A riveted spherical boiler made up the main body, patched metal plates and crooked chimneys coughing foul black smoke. 6 thick, insectile mechanical legs supported the mass. At the front, a colossal alloy drill, over 5 meters across, nicked and streaked with dark red, still rotated slowly, a blunt instrument that had chewed through stone and flesh alike. A reinforced glass cockpit ringed with steel bars sat atop the boiler. Inside, several squat, heavily muscled, grayish-green creatures peered out with sharp, greedy eyes. Goblins. Their ears were long, noses hooked. Their faces wore the raw, calculating hunger of scavengers. They had spotted the party and the elemental core lying on the ground. "Gugak!" The goblin in the cockpit, wearing a rusty iron helmet, shrieked, a sound full of excitement and greed. He yanked a lever. The drill's grinding stopped with a grinding groan. 2 huge steam cannons on either side of the boiler creaked into position and swung their black muzzles to point at Jason's group. A tense standoff hung heavy in the air. 178, Dimensionality Reduction Strike. Drilling mech versus arcane missiles. Grumble, grumble, ooga, ooga. The goblin captain pushed himself upright, jabbed a finger at the elemental core on the ground, then pointed at Jason and the others, barking in a harsh guttural language. The message was clear: leave the item and get out. Harry and Ron instinctively took half a step back. The arcane light flared in their palms. Facing a construct made entirely of steel and steam, they felt for the first time that a completely different kind of fight was about to begin. The towering drilling mecha loomed above them, its steel skin casting a huge shadow. The dark, hollow steam cannon began to growl. Heat warped the air around its muzzle. "Guga! Gralala!" the goblin inside the cockpit roared, slamming the controls and jabbed again and again at the core with greedy eyes. He'd clearly run out of patience. "What are they saying?" Ron asked, Arcane already condensed in his hand. "Probably some kind of ultimatum," Hermione said, staring nervously at the steam cannon. "Energy readings are spiking. It's about to fire." "Why bother with ultimatums?" Ron's temper flared. "How dare it point that heap at us? Take this!" He didn't wait for Jason's cue. He reacted on instinct with the spell he knew best. Earth Spike Technique. Sharp spikes of earth screamed up from the ground and struck the spherical boiler of the drilling mecha. But the expected explosion never came. The spike struck the heavy steel hull and erupted into a shower of sparks before fizzling out. The impact left only a shallow scratch, barely more than scuffed paint. "Gag, gag, gag!" The goblins in the cockpit were startled for a beat, then burst into hysterical laughter. They pounded their chests and stomped their feet, pointing at Ron as if he'd told the funniest joke in the world. Ron flushed with mortification and anger. He hadn't expected his powerful earth spike would not even dent their defense. "Ron, don't be impulsive," Hermione snapped. The goblin captain's patience had snapped. Infuriated, he shrieked and slammed a red trigger. Boom! The steam cannon fired. Raw, industrial force blasted out, a gray-white cloud of scalding steam, laden with countless glowing metal fragments, screamed forward with a high, whistling keening. "Shield charm!" Hermione poured everything into the spell. A thick, solid barrier ringed them, shimmering with magical light and springing from nothing. The steam and shrapnel hit it with a deafening roar. The shield shuddered violently, hairline cracks webbed over its surface. Hermione grunted, face paling, but it held. This attack, Harry watched the shaking barrier, voice low. Its power is probably no less than an adult dragon's breath. No, this is more troublesome than dragon breath. Jason, who had been silent, finally spoke. He shook his head and glanced over the cocky drilling mecha as if critiquing a crude machine. Bloated structure, abysmal energy conversion, joints are all weak points. It's essentially a mobile coffin cobbled from scrap metal. He stepped out from behind Hermione's shield, unhurried, as the steam cannon began to recharge. The goblins inside the cockpit brayed threats and drove the mecha to menace him, but Jason only raised his right hand casually. No complicated incantations, no brilliant sigils, just a tiny pinprick of concentrated arcane, the size of a thumb, forming at his fingertip. It glowed pure blue, quietly, with no detectable leak of power. Ron's eyes widened. Jason, who'd been so calm, was about to use a basic arcane missiles on that behemoth? Then Jason flicked his finger. The arcane missile shot out silently, tracing a blue arc almost invisible to the eye. It didn't charge the thick frontal armor. Instead, it curved neatly around and darted toward one of the 6 mechanical limbs supporting the machine. It aimed for the left leg, specifically the transmission joint at the knee, the most complex spot, crisscrossed with hydraulic lines and gears. Crack! The sound was like a glass bell. Time seemed to slow. Under everyone's stunned gaze, the steel limb, thick as a person, snapped at the joint. Parts and gears sprayed everywhere amid a blast of high-pressure steam. Rumble, the giant drilling mecha lost its balance, pitching left. With a teeth-grinding metallic screech, it collapsed sideways, smashing into the ground. Dust billowed up. The proud, roaring construct now lay on its side, immobile. Only a few chimneys still coughed out black smoke. Silence fell. Harry, Ron, and even the Weasley twins stared, dazed. One hit, just one. The steel monster that had shredded a shield charm was now a pile of scrap. For the first time, they saw what Jason meant by the true terror of Arcane, not world-ending power, but absolute, rational precision that saw the essence of a thing and struck the vital point. This wasn't a fight. This was a dimensionality reduction strike. Gah! The goblins inside the cockpit whimpered. The surviving crew crawled out of the wreckage and looked at the unharmed figure approaching. Greed and cunning faded, replaced by a raw, animal fear. Jason's steps were unhurried. He stopped beside the twisted cockpit and allowed a small, polite smile. Facing the trembling goblin captain inside, he prepared to begin a very friendly conversation. The cockpit door screamed as metal twisted and was forced open from the inside. The goblin captain scrambled out, followed by several other survivors. They were filthy with grease and coolant, their clothes torn from the tumble, but their instincts, hard and fierce as their race, made them draw the waist-mounted pistols at once. The guns were crude and oversized, cobbled together from wrenches, gears, and brass pipe. Little steam tanks clung to their belts, and the muzzles glowed ominously. They leveled their weapons at Jason as he walked forward, hissing through their teeth to cover how badly shaken they really were. "They look like they'll fight," Ron muttered, his hand tightening on the Godslayer dagger. "Don't," Hermione said, stopping him. She stepped forward and raised her wand. "Their language is unusual. Let me try." A scholar more than a warrior, Hermione preferred to open a conversation before opening a fight. "Comprehend languages." A soft white beam shot from the tip of her wand and touched the goblin captain. The light flickered across his grayish-green skin and vanished as if it had hit an invisible barrier. Hermione's face drained. Comprehend languages was a self-contained spell. It should have worked. If it failed, it meant their language might not be a vocal system at all. The bridge of communication had collapsed before it was even built. Sensing the failure, the goblin captain seemed to gain a sliver of courage. He uttered a strange cry, raised his gear pistol, and looked ready to order a volley. Jason studied the dozen crude steam weapons pointed at him as if they were toys. He looked at the goblin's eyes, greedy, afraid, and reverent toward power and machinery, and understood. This race worshipped strength and technology. To reach them, he would have to create a kind of authority they could not ignore, something beyond words. He closed his eyes. A different kind of power rolled out from him, wider and purer than the arcane missiles he had used before. First tier arcane, mental link. The invisible force spread like living tendrils across the battlefield, finding the goblin captain and slipping into the confused clamor of his thoughts. From the captain's perspective, his heart hammered. His finger hovered over the trigger, and his mind screamed to open fire and tear the monster before him apart. And then, as if from nowhere, a voice spoke inside his head, not spoken aloud, but a pure thought carrying the pressure of a higher being. "Put down your weapons." The captain trembled. What was that? Who spoke? He looked around in panic. His companions wore the same baffled expressions. They had heard nothing, but the thought struck again. "We mean you no harm." "I am very interested in your technology." It was like lightning. The way the thought had poured directly into his mind shattered everything he knew. In the old legends of their people, only the Earth Spirit, the creator who slept beneath the world, sent oracles into the faithful. A miracle. A god. Could this fragile human before him be a deity? The idea swallowed him whole. Terror overwhelmed his will. The gear pistol slipped from his fingers and clattered to the rock. Jason opened his eyes and met the captain's, which brimmed with panic and worship. Through the link, he heard the scattered, awed images racing through the goblin's mind. Gods, divine punishment, irresistible might. He had what he needed. Jason sealed the impression with a final thought through the link. "Now, we can talk." To the goblin captain, that was no mere sentence. It was the god's decree. He collapsed into worship. The fierce look drained from his face and was replaced with abject reverence. He dropped to his knees and slammed his iron-helmed forehead against the hard ground over and over, the dull thuds echoing. His muttered syllables were incoherent, but full of devotion. One by one, his companions followed suit, weapons hitting the ground, then knees. The barrier between them had been broken in the most overwhelming and impossible way. Harry and Ron exchanged a look somewhere between shock and tired awe. They had grown unnervingly used to Jason's extraordinary and inexplicable methods. Jason ignored their astonishment. Using the mental link he had established, he gave his first command to the groveling goblin captain. "Take us to your city." The captain stiffened, then banged his head down harder, signaling total obedience. In that instant, a new chapter in another world began. 180. The power of arcane magic. Jason's mental link hit the goblin captain's chaotic mind like a boulder thrown into a still pond, stirring a storm. The raw experience of a higher will invading his thoughts shattered the captain's worldview, one built on machines and brute force. For a moment the goblin cowered, utterly undone by a force he couldn't comprehend. But goblin greed and faith in their own inventions are like barnacles on a reef. Once the tide pulls back, they claw their way back to the surface. The captain still knelt, but his eyes kept flicking to the drilling mecha Jason had felled with a single blow. That machine was goblin engineering made manifest, their walking bank account in the underground world. It had lost a leg, yes, but as long as its core boiler held, it could still power up. That faint, stubborn hope was immediately snagged by Jason's mental power. A simple demonstration won't teach you the difference, Jason said, voice calm, no anger, only a detached curiosity. To break a race that worshipped technology and strength, he knew, you didn't just beat bodies, you dismantled their certainty. He fed a thought through the link. Stand up, have your crew return to that machine, make it move, use your strongest weapon to attack me. The goblin captain trembled. He looked up with wide, unbelieving eyes. Was this god offering a chance? Or did he not grasp how utterly hopeless their war machine was? This was their only chance. Guga! Gulara! He barked, scrambling toward the overturned cockpit. The rest of the crew seized the lifeline, clambering back into the controls on all fours. Screeching metal and escaping steam filled the air as the drilling mecha hauled itself upright on its remaining 5 limbs. The side steam cannons charged. Their muzzles glowed a dangerous red and swung to bear on Jason and his friends. War hung in the balance. Is he insane? Ron shouted, panic cracking his voice as he stared at the looming steel monster. Jason, move! Impatient as ever, he didn't wait. He flung a prepped arcane fireball with a flourish. It streaked orange-red and smashed into the mecha's thick chest armor. The impact produced no spectacular burst. The fireball, meeting the riveted plating, it fanned into a few sparks and simply went out. From the cockpit came a burst of goblin cackling, sharp, triumphant. The mecha crew's confidence crept back. Ron! Hermione called, alarmed, but her warning was cut off by the goblin captain slamming the firing lever. Boom! A gray-white column of steam, spiked with scalding metal shards, roared out at terrifying speed, shrieking through the air toward the group. Hermione reacted instantly. Arcane deflection field, she cried, waving her wand. An invisible dome unfolded in front of them. The steam cloud didn't hit and stop so much as meet the field and have its trajectory bent, forced aside by a gentle but unyielding shove. The redirected blast slammed into the rock wall behind them with an appalling roar. The impact blew a vast pit into the stone, sending debris tumbling and demonstrating, beyond doubt, the raw, destructive force of goblin engineering. Harry and Ron watched with pale faces. Jason didn't even blink. He stepped forward as if admiring a sculpture. See? He said, casual and almost amused. Crude, brutal, but it works. He stopped within sight of the mecha and began, almost clinically, to criticize it. Energy conversion is under 60%. Most output wasted as heat and noise. Joints are overbuilt for strength at the cost of flexibility. Armor is just thick plates stacked with no regard for stress distribution. Arcane power isn't about bigger explosions, he added. It's about discerning essence. He lifted his right hand. An arcane ray, precise as an X-ray, slid from his eye and swept across the mecha. The war machine dissolved into a 3-dimensional blueprint inside Jason's vision. Energy conduits glowing with flow direction, gears annotated with load values, every structural weakness highlighted. He found the weak point, the fragile but crucial energy conduction pipeline, and the core transmission gear already grinding at the edge of its tolerance. Watch closely, Jason said. He extended a finger. A hair-thin purple filament leapt from his fingertip. Arcane deconstruction ray. It pierced the outer shell and struck 2 critical nodes inside the machine, separate, meters apart, but mutually vital. The goblins were still exultant over their steam blast, and Harry and Ron were still bracing for the worst. Then, a faint, glassy ding sounded from within the mecha. Instantly, the sound multiplied into a sequence of tearing and shattering, cracks, snaps, the sickening groan of metal failing and pipes rupturing. Red status lights winked out, Steam cannons sagged. The mecha convulsed as its internal systems collapsed in a catastrophic cascade. With a final tortured shriek of twisting metal, the giant machine fell sideways, collapsing into a smoking heap of scrap. For a moment, there was only stunned silence. The goblin's last defenses, mental and technological both, were smashed in a humiliation that left them slack-jawed. Jason walked to the battered cockpit, toward the goblin captain who sat slumped and trembling, as hollowed out as his ruined machine. He tapped into the captain's mind once more, a quiet final projection. "Now, do you still want to fight?"